The scientific revolution starts now.
The Demystified Podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
This is something that happens inside of the mind. It happens between a hypnotist and the subject. And these sorts of phenomena have been, for a very long period of time, scrutinized and denigrated in a way that might not be fair.
I think that's fair. Yes, I think you're dead right. And there's some analogies to this sounds strange, to witchcraft. And what's interesting is if you go to a hypnosis conference, you will find people who consider themselves to be witches there as well. But unlike witchcraft, there's been a number of scientific studies and a history of scientific studies around hypnosis that gives it far more concrete legitimacy, I think. So, but yeah, you're right.
Is that because trance-like states were originally associated with witchcraft? Is that the idea? Shared methodology?
Maybe I can give you a really clear example, because when people go into trance, one of the most common behaviors, especially among good subjects, is their eyes roll up. So their eyes become white, which is straight out of The Exorcist. And I think that so the stereotype of the possessed person is literally the hypnotized person. So so that could explain some of the fear, the irrational fear of hypnosis.
And the witches were using that to tap into other realms. Like, were they doing? All right, so let me back this up. We associate hypnosis in the modern age with kind of self-help and the ability to quit smoking, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you think there was an element of that in witchcraft?
Well, I can tell you this really weird. Yes, because I think witchcraft is self-help. I think that's what witches would say, and but also there's these weird parallels. For example, with night flight. So one of the original, as my understanding, one of the original attacks on witches was that there was a belief. I can't date it, but I know there was a very interesting investigation that in France, I think either 11th or 12th century, monk writes a treatise saying that women are meeting secretly, and they are flying to a particular place, and they are opening a portal to hell. That's why we've got to burn them in the public square as soon as possible. And
make our own hell on earth.
Yes, and 14 people died, I think, and it was really the first witch burning. But the reason I say the parallel is that when you hypnotize people, almost everybody who goes into deep trance can fly. Now, I don't mean you don't see them physically flying, but they will describe themselves as having a flying experience. We could do that today with these guys. These guys could probably fly. And you could ask them afterwards, how much did you feel like you're flying? And they would probably say quite a bit. So I'm saying is night flight is real.
Well, it's really interesting because we had a woman on the show a while ago, Tanya Luhrmann, who's an anthropologist at Stanford who studies the inner life of witches, and she embedded herself in modern day covens and studied their practices, and she did the same thing for Christian communities. But something that she noticed was that an enormous part of the process of witchery was visualization and these guided meditations of you go to a place, you have an experience, there's someone who's very, very experienced in being able to guide you through that. And so you spend all of this time together in a group, basically imagining that you are in a place where you're not, and you go and you meet the gods and you have this transcendent experience and you come out and you feel great. And that seems very, very hypnotic.
What you described is hypnosis. And I can give you maybe another funny example too, is that is yoga. Yoga is hypnosis. Now, not every yoga class, but restorative yoga or yoga.
I can tell you not every yoga class, because this has always been one of the worst things about going to a yoga class is that the teachers don't grasp that it is supposed to be hypnosis.
Yeah, or relaxing.
And there's the verbal tics and strange frequencies in people's voices, and the way that they guide you can be very disconcerting. And there's so few teachers that understand that it is a hypnotic process. And so it makes for a very alienating and difficult experience when you go to a yoga class expecting the hypnosis and you show up and it's just some bubbly sorority girl.
Yeah. But see, what I find funny about that is that people would be like, hypnosis over here is this sort of bizarre, strange activity, but yoga is very, on every street corner. And it's not, when I say that yoga is hypnosis, I'm not saying it's like hypnosis. I would say there are forms of yoga like yoga nidra, which have zero difference. There's zero difference between yoga nidra and a standard hypnotic script. It's absolutely the same thing. And even so, again, like you go to a stage hypnosis show and you're like, people are walking around like zombies. They're doing what the hypnotist says. Well, you go to a yoga class and people are like, I don't know exactly how I got into that pose, but I did. Well, yeah, maybe it was hypnosis.
What's that standard script, by the way, just so we can get on the same page?
What, sorry, yoga nidra or
just standard hypnosis script? What's the standard features of that?
So progressive relaxation is a kind of like, and that's where you do body scan hypnosis. So the top of your head is relaxing, the muscles around your eyes are relaxing. You go down the body, and that's what yoga nidra does too. But yoga nidra is a little fussier. Let's talk about the skin between your fingers and your fascia relaxes and things like that. But body scan, the first way to hypnotize someone is you just body scan them and then say sleep. And that's pretty well, and that's what yoga nidra does.
That's really interesting. I discovered an old army manual about how to go to sleep really fast. And it was very similar. It started at the toes, though. It was like just basically relax all of your limbs and then slowly get to your core and your heart. And this whole method for how you slow your heart down and everything is kind of incredible.
Yeah,
I've actually been using it. Yeah, to take.
Yeah, totally. Because it makes sense if you're parachuted in behind enemy lines, you got to learn how to take a nap or whatever once in a while. So yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Did we actually start, or we just immediately leapt into conversation? It's funny that
we did. Yeah, but maybe if you want to orient people to who you are and just introduce yourself and tell us the real motive forces that have propelled you into this moment, because I know you've had a winding career. You started off making some of these kind of outrageous documentaries, and anyways, just tell people who you are.
Sure. Okay. So I'm really honored to be here. My name is Albert Nerenburg. I'm here as a hypnotist, and I should explain. I didn't come to it voluntarily. I'm joking a little bit in that I wasn't. I think there are people who like see a hypnosis show and they go like, I want to be that. I was never that person. I thought hypnotists were suspect, maybe even a bit creepy at times. So it didn't have any appeal for me. And the story is very simple. I was an investigative journalist, a straight documentary filmmaker for many years. I worked for newspapers, very like a fact guy. And I was actually assigned to do a very strange documentary about people who dreamt about 9/11 before it happened. So the kind of very weird, surreal documentary for a series. And a weird twist of the film was that there was debate about how people actually died in 9/11. So we obtained footage of some of these terrible scenes of death scenes. And stupidly, I watched the footage because I was just trying to get ahead of my deadlines at night alone. And some of those images were burned into my brain in a way that I recognized later was kind of like PTSD. And I started having sleeping problems and anxiety and realized that there was something wrong with me. Then I happened to see an ad online that said, do you have obsessive thoughts you can't get out of your mind? And I was like, hey, that's me. And they just said, call this number first time free. I'm not the kind of person who normally does that, but because I knew I was having obsessive thoughts, because I was not feeling well, I called the number. And this guy runs a protocol on me very quickly, friendly guy. I don't even remember who it was now. And in half an hour, this thing that really had traumatized me for 6 months or had affected my life and sleep instantly went away. I felt it go away in real time. And right after that call, I was like, I got to learn how to be a hypnotist. Mainly because I thought half my friends are traumatized too. I worked in an environment where PTSD was quite common. So I thought I could help people. Then when I learned how to be a hypnotist, sort of the initial stages, then I was like, wait a second, holy cow, there are massive misunderstandings, massive new frontiers, and massive implications to what I was learning. And then next thing I know, I was on a TEDx. So I wasn't on a TEDx. I thought about.
You just woke up one day.
Yeah, I woke up and I'm like, hey, you're giving me a TEDx. That'd be a good dream, by the way. So next thing I know, I auditioned for a TEDx because I thought I've got some kind of burning information I should share. And a funny thing happened. I think they were like, "What? Well, who are you? And what are you going to talk about?" But they said, "Why don't you hypnotize us if you're such a big hypnotist?" And the jury. So there's like in this particular TEDx, there was a jury that sort of examines you. They're all hypnotizable. They were instantly hypnotized and went into deep trance. And then what was funny is like everyone else, they said, "We'll get back to you in a couple of weeks." And they said, just as I was leaving, they said, "Don't worry." They said, "You're in, you're booked." That was it. So then I basically do this TEDx, and this is part of, I think, the weirdness of the story is that I do this TEDx, is hypnosis fake? And I thought like that's because I thought it was fake. I could come at it. It was fresh enough in my memory that I thought, or at least I thought it was a bit of sleight of hand or, almost a magic trick. And so what happened was I thought this is a great idea. Is hypnosis fake? I'm going to prove to you right here in real time that it's not. So I do a TEDx, which is exactly that. I explain the theory, and it's like a new theory of the model of how hypnosis works. I realize I'm taking a while to explain this, but this will be the end. And then I demonstrate with hypnosis by hypnotizing people that hypnosis is not fake. But when the TEDx comes out, it immediately goes viral, not immediately, pretty quickly goes viral. And of course, there's a huge population, I would say the majority, who thinks it is fake. Causes like a huge controversy, a lot of weird hostility. People threatening to kill me, people threatening to kill the people in the video.
God. Well, you've made it when people are trying to kill you. So.
Yeah. Somebody explained that to me. That's right. When you've gone viral when people threaten to kill you. Because there's somebody out there who hates what you are, and you've somehow found them. So anyways, that was the beginning. So that probably should end there.
I mean, I really want to know what that person said to you on the phone. Do you remember what the protocol was?
The Demystify Sci podcast is supported by viewers like you. And so if you are sitting there enjoying our conversation and you're thinking about, my goodness, what can I do to help support the Demystify Sci podcast? Think no more and come on over to patreon.com/demystifysci. You can give us a couple dollars a month, which allows us to put gas in the tank, so to speak. In return, you get both episodes for the week early. You get to join our amazing crew of Sunday patrons where we get together and we talk about all of the ideas that are rattling around in our heads, try to dig into new topics that we're going to cover on the program, think about new questions that we should encounter in the world, and just in general, grow a community. It is lonely to be out in the world having thoughts all by yourself. And so the Sunday patron chat is the best place to do that. If you don't have any money, that's totally fine. You can come by our Facebook, you can come by our Discord, you can follow us on Twitter, or you can mark on your calendar April 6th and 7th of next year, where Demystify Sci is having our first conference in Austin, Texas. We'll put tickets on sale soon, and in the meantime, enjoy the conversation with Albert Nerenburg.
What they did is a well-known protocol, which is a mixture of NLP and hypnosis. It's called the Visual Kinesthetic Dissociation Protocol. That's sorry for talking so fast, but that's the original name. It's also sometimes called the fast phobia release or the rewind technique. This was a technique developed by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, I believe, the people who originated neurolinguistic programming, which is controversial for its own reasons. And what's interesting about it is that it can de-traumatize people very quickly and is extremely effective. And it also has been relegated a little bit to the world of kookery, but it is probably the most effective way to de-traumatize people. And there was recently a study out of, I'm just trying to remember the university, but it's a guy, all I can remember offhand, his name is Gray, Gray, did a study using this protocol on veterans, I think Iraq war veterans, all who had PTSD, with a 95% success rate.
Can you give me a feel for what kind of things this person was saying to you, or what you would say to a war veteran, or how is it in the content?
I can run the protocol. I can run it very quickly. It's a beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, you're not in
protocol.
a hurry, by the way, man. Like we're here all day. It's all good.
Right.
Relax. Right. Yeah, no worries.
I want to tell you, like, this is such a powerful protocol, and it's so effective. Like, it's not like I don't want to say it's 100%, but 90% of the time it's so effective that it should be better known. And I thought originally I wanted to do a show because 9/11 was a mass traumatizing event. And we all watched it, right? Unless you weren't born at the time, but we all watched it. And everyone who watched it was probably traumatized. That it's actually a perfect metaphor for this protocol. I always wanted to do a show where we ran this protocol as a TV show on let's say the American population, so that they could be mass de-traumatized. But whenever I pitched this to networks, they were always like, I don't know. The truth is, like, I work in television, and you may know this already, but television has no interest in making you a healthier, better person.
That's so weird. I would not have expected that.
Yeah. I thought it would have been a great show. And anyway, so you asked the question, like, what is the protocol? It's a really elegant and beautiful protocol. It works like this. You find out what the person's obsessive memory is. So let's say I have an obsessive memory of being hit by a car, because that would be, a red car. And every time I am reminded, so every time I see a red car, every time somebody mentions a red car, or I'm somehow reminded, I recreate a traumatic state. My heart beats, I can't think straight, I might feel distress. And this is serious stuff. This can drive people to addiction, because the only time they feel okay is when they, use a substance that calms them down or something like that. So you can see how it can be a real issue. So all the hypnotist does is there's different ways of doing it, but what I would do is you get the person to talk about the obsessive memory, and I play a little game with them. And I do this for a reason. So if you were hit by a red car, I would ask you about the story of how you were hit by the red car, and I would pretend to not really understand your story, even though it's maybe fairly simple. Why? Because I want you to be really I want you to bring it back to life. Or I might even say, like, well, what would be bad about that? What would be bad about being hit by a car? And they'd be like, do you know what it's like? What it feels like to have a massive 2-ton object run you over? See, so now they're in the trauma. They're actually, in a sense, revivifying the trauma. And now I've got the first step. At this point, I ask them, how bad does that thing feel? How bad does that trauma feel? And if it's really a trauma, they'll say, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 out of 10, maybe 10, often 10 out of 10. Now we know we've identified the traumatic memory. And there's only one other thing I would ask them. Can you remember, like, kind of the worst part? The part that, and this is the thing, you probably, if I asked you, and if your listeners and viewers, if I asked them, I don't want you to feel traumatized, but to remember traumatic experiences, you remember them as photographs, flashes. Not everybody, but most of the time. And I think what the brain does is it has a sort of a tagging system where it tags traumatic memories with pictures, kind of like the internet or something like that. And so that's all I ask them. Now we've got the tag. Then you put them into trance. So that can be whatever way you put people in trance. So you can do progressive relaxation where they gradually relax into trance, or you can do it other ways. And it actually doesn't really matter which way. You just got to get them into a relaxed state. Then the protocol involves you go to a movie theater. So you have them walk down a street. They notice that there's a movie theater where the doors are wide open. They walk into the movie theater. You ask them to walk into the movie theater, and you got to make sure it's a comfortable place. It's not a haunted movie theater. It is a nice. You smell popcorn. but are familiar, friendly, but you're alone because this is your business. And you have them sit down in nice velvet red seats. Now, here's the interesting thing. You have them either float back or walk back to the projection booth. And this is why it's called dissociation, the visual dissociation protocol. They are now dissociating from their experience. So you literally have them do it as a metaphor where you're now in the projection booth. And now we're going to run the movie of what happened to you. The movie that you just kind of woke up, 5 minutes ago. So then you run the movie of you being hit by the car, and you see it though, but you watch it from the projection booth, dissociated. So the reason for this is to see that this is something that happened to you. It's not something that you see from the inside. That's an important consideration because those are very different things. When that's already like you've done like 30% of the work. Now, you run the movie in slow motion, you ask them to freeze on the tag, or you would say the language often is the worst part, the part that is the part that really sticks out. They freeze. Okay, it's that moment where where I realized like the grill of the car was going to hit my face, right? It's that sick moment. Freeze on that moment. And you ask them, is this the worst part? You ask them to agree, or you make sure that you found it. They usually can put up a finger. We found the worst part. Okay, good. Now take that image. And this is in my view, where the magic happens. So you're looking at this terrible moment. Yes. It feels terrible. Yes. Remove all the color. You ask them to remove all the color, make it black and white. This is a very powerful moment. Often at that exact moment, they are starting to de-traumatize. Make the image black and white, and now begin to shrink it down. Shrink it down so it's half as big, quarter as big. What you're doing, and until it's like a tiny white dot on the screen. And what you've done is you haven't destroyed the traumatic memory. You haven't repressed the traumatic memory. You've destroyed the way it is tagged in the brain. So you just shrink it down. Often you ask them metaphorically to pull it off the screen and throw it over their shoulders. Like imagine it going over a set of beautiful mountains and dropping into the ocean. It goes into the ocean and it disappears. That's a metaphor for it going into long-term memory where it should be. It shouldn't be something you wake up with every day, but that's what you're doing now. You're waking up with these. If you have a trauma, you're kind of waking up with it every day. Instead, we put it into the ocean of long-term memory. Then that's it. The person, when it happened to me, you often feel this weird moment where it's like a balloon deflating. The trauma deflates. And then when you wake the person up, you can test it. You go, okay, when I asked you before, you said this felt 9 out of 10 bad. How does it feel now? And if you've done it right, they're going to say either 0 or 1. Most commonly, sometimes they say 2 or 3. Sometimes it means it hasn't worked exactly, but and then it's gone, and it never comes back.
That's wild.
It has they have de-traumatized.
Why do you think the color change is significant?
Because great question. Remember, we're back at traumatic memories being like these flashes of something very vivid.
Mm.
Well, bad things or traumatic things are more vivid in the brain. I think if you looked at it in terms of data, they suck up way more data than, just that time you had tea with your friend at the coffee shop. So the vivid, terrible memory is colorful, intense, and vivid. When you remove the color from it, the brain conflates it now or mixes it up with one of your other regular memories, which is what it is. It's just another thing that happened to you. And it stops having star status. You can still remember it. So if you ask the person, like, do you remember being hit by the car? They're like, yeah. The difference is it has lost its traumatic charge. It's still there, but there's no charge. And then they feel better.
I was going to ask, you were going to ask something. Go ahead.
No, I was just trying to kind of do it in my head as we were going through, because I have like some recent traumas I was trying to deal with. But I was wondering, I was thinking about, we got it, like we got attacked by this copyright troll and we got sued in federal court, and it was really, really traumatic for me.
Yeah.
We ended up winning by
we
landslide.
represented ourselves in federal court and we won.
We did, yeah.
Good for you.
It was so it was so terrifying to me. I just never faced anything so, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars were on the table potentially, right? And I knew we'd never broke the law or anything, but I also knew we knew nothing about the law and we didn't know what we were doing. And so, I was trying to go through that. My question, I guess, was going to be, can you do this to yourself, or do you need somebody to walk you through it?
Okay, one is, yes, you can I think it's better in terms of just doing it properly, because there are some mistakes you can make, I think, to have it done to you first. But there's a self-hypnosis system that works as well. And not only that, there's an interesting thing. The hypnotist doesn't need to know what it is. So you can do it content-free, which means you would just, the hypnotist would just say, think of the thing that is upsetting to you. And now think of it closer, or maybe they would revivify it, but you don't have to tell me what it is. So this can be a deeply personal or deeply troubling memory. And two, the same principle works. I'm glad we're sharing this, because I do this all the time. I have a funny, kind of story to tell about this, but when, like, a lot of people have obsessive memories, have intrusive thoughts, have things like they don't want to think about it, and they actually just live with it. Well, you don't have to live with it. You can clear that stuff out. And so the way to do it to yourself is to use that same principle. Now, it may, depending on the intensity of the experience, it may or may not work. But all you do is you think of the terrible thing that you can't help thinking about. You're thinking about it anyway. Then you try to find the worst part. You sit in it.
Yeah, that was the hardest part for me, was like identifying a single scene or something like that, because it was just this years, and it was hard for me to do that part. Yeah.
Which
but
makes
you know what I would say. Sorry, go ahead.
Like, it makes me think that there would be a different approach for something that was discrete trauma rather than chronic trauma, right? Because there's two different kinds of inflammation. There's momentary inflammation from an infection or something, and then there's chronic inflammation, and they have totally different effects on the body. And I wonder if chronic trauma versus acute trauma are different things in terms of success in these systems.
I would say, I want to say that's kind of a little bit above my pay grade, and that I'm not sure what the answer is. That I would say that what's interesting is that Richard Bandler, who developed this, would say, like, there can be the very worst traumas, like the worst, and this protocol can handle them. And I also think there can be ongoing, or like somebody who had regular, but then what you do then is it works like a bit like what's the word, like a train, where you start with the one that people are obsessed with, and then what happens when you get rid of that, a new one comes up. This is actually why it's often a weekly process, because you discharge the first trauma, which is you remove the charge, and then people are like, oh, now I remember what the other one that had parallels to this was, and then you do that one. And usually it sounds like, well, then you'd be at it for months, but actually usually people only seem to carry about 4 or 5 major traumatic memories, and then they kind of clear. But that's been my experience. And I think I would compare that to other hypnotists too, that's what they noticed as well.
Interesting.
I think we're going to have to try this out after the show.
Well, it's just so interesting to me, because I like...
We try it on each other.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. I mean, so for me, I feel like I don't carry a tremendous amount of trauma. If I was going to put myself in a position where this would be useful, I'm like, I have a lot of strange feelings about childhood, because I feel like most kids, when they grow up, they get to go out and do stuff. But my parents were very much against that. And I was if we were immigrants, I was the middle child, and like no sports, no friends, no teams, no activities, just this kind of weird caged existence. And it wasn't like particularly, like, they weren't.
You broke out a lot.
I did sneak out of the house a lot, but they didn't know that until very recently. But the idea that there was one traumatic thing, like, there isn't anything that's, even when I describe it to people, I'm like, they didn't hit me, like, there wasn't anything, they didn't neglect me, I had a stay-at-home mom who was, like, super attentive, but there's this, like, weird void in that place in childhood.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not real. I can't describe it as, man, I have PTSD.
I think we got to make the train out of that one. You know,
Yeah.
line up all the most painful pieces and knock them down.
You know what I would do with that? That's, to me, it's a very interesting scenario. And I would say, I would still say the brain, the unconscious seizes on particular moments. Like the brain is a meaning machine. So it tries to make sense. It's going to be in the business of saying, like, this is my wound, or this is, and it's going to seize on, it will choose like an event that, like, it, in the way a film director will go, like, this is the turning point. Or so for example, what I would do with that is I would say, like, it really helps to, like, have basic understandings of animal behavior, weirdly enough, because you can say anything that's traumatic to an animal, and a social animal would be at risk of becoming a trauma. So isolation, not feeling part of the tribe, not being protected by the tribe, that's dangerous, right? It's dangerous. So the unconscious is going to read it as risk. And I would see that would create low-level continuous anxiety. And so that's why I would say, like, the antidote would be, you need to do things that make you feel like you're part of the tribe. But let's say, like, having a popular podcast where you socialize and connect with people. You're doing it already.
Working on it.
Yeah, the popular part is a little out of our hands. But no, I think that you're right. I think that there is a tendency for people to self-medicate in these sorts of ways where the piece that's missing, and you have two options where you either ignore it and you bury it, or you pursue it. And I think that there is a tendency in people that are traumatized. Some people remain, like, okay, so you can have two people that have the exact same experience. One person is traumatized, the other person is not.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
One person is helped by hypnosis. The other person, I think, probably does the thing that you're talking about inherently, intuitively by themselves already. Do you know what I mean? Where there's some process that is buried deep inside of that person's brain where they see the thing, they encounter it, they feel weird about it, they unpack that, they lessen the impact. It becomes this diffuse experience, and then it's put away and you can move on. Because I've met people like this that just don't seem to stick on anything. They're fine. And I think that they must be doing something. I don't think that it's because they're impervious to the sticking. I think that it is that they are good at clearing. That's my instinct.
Or good at repressing. Like, that's the weird thing. I mean, they're good at repressing their traumas, and they don't. You feel like there's any consequence to it, and sometimes there isn't. You can repress your traumas and you'll be fine. Sometimes it's just that. Yeah, but if you get hit by a red car again, or if you see that red car coming at you, maybe that's when you get triggered. And also there's other things, like if you did ayahuasca, because what I think is interesting about ayahuasca, only because it's a de-traumatizing experience officially, is that unlike, let's say, therapy, where we use talk to try to figure out your traumatic history, I think ayahuasca does it chemically. Mm-hmm. It's just going to show you trauma. There's no therapist in between. So all I'm saying is, but I also think, there's an interesting point here too. What blew my mind when I learned this protocol was that I have a lot more traumas. When I was a reporter, I was beaten up by the police during a military standoff. I had a lot of traumatic experiences. I was at a school shooting, saw a lot of terrible things, and I just thought, because I coped with it, because I went to sleep that night and I felt okay, I just assumed I was kind of all right. But also on the other hand, nobody told me that there was an easy and convenient way to become de-traumatized. And that's what I said is, so what I mentioned before is that it takes 4 or 5 sessions for the average person to really lighten their traumatic load. If I had known that, I also had disdain, and I still do actually to a certain extent, for talk therapy. Because, and there's some really, I don't have the study at hand, but I can tell you exactly why. I just thought talk therapy, like I had friends who had the talk therapy, and a lot of them got worse, or they got annoying. you know.
And it never ends, right? Like the idea of talk therapy is that you just do this now for the rest of your life. You go and you talk stuff over.
It seems like a conflict of interest with the business model there.
Yes. So, we see generally hypnotists and talk therapists are at odds. That's some of the enmity around hypnosis, is that hypnosis is quick and effective, and talk therapy, on average, they're like, oh, maybe after 3 years we might get somewhere. And let me tell you, really interesting. I wish I could quote the study. I just don't have it but there was really an amazing study where they did MRI scans of what they considered to be the healing process, and what they would with trauma. So they would take people and they would get them to. They identified the process that kind of went like this. The trauma needs to emerge out of the fog. People don't always know they're traumatized. They don't always understand their trauma. So talking about it is the first step. Like, now I realize like something bad happened, or the weird behavior I'm doing maybe is a result of this traumatic experience. It's emerging out of the fog. Then as they begin to talk about it, they can describe it. So it's kind of like the second step. Like, I was hit by the car and that's my trauma. And it makes me feel this. Okay, but there's a third stage that's necessary for healing. So once it emerges from the fog, there must be catharsis. So it needs to, like, sometimes you need to go back and see the car and smash it with a sledgehammer. Or it's interesting that some people believe that the natural de-traumatizing process involves revenge. There's a whole other kind of whole. Let me explain why. There's a really interesting why. If you lived in the savannah and you were a small juvenile monkey, which is what we might have been, and you're attacked by a leopard, let's say a juvenile leopard, and it just about kills you. At the last moment, your parents arrive or the tribe arrives and they save you. Now you're traumatized. Every time somebody mentions leopard, every time you see spots, you go into a traumatic fit or incredible weird energy. You feel terrified, you shake, because you haven't healed the trauma. Okay, but now you grow up. You grow up and you're out in the savannah and you're big and you've got a spear. And guess who do you run into but your old friend, the leopard that tried to kill you and eat you. This time you're strong and you have a spear and you kill that leopard. You revenge time. You murder it. Your hair stands up on end. It's part of the process. And the trauma discharges. You know, now when people say leopard, you laugh. You no longer have a traumatic wound from the original experience. Now, this is scary to consider because it sounds like you should say, like, everybody who was traumatized should seek revenge on the thing that traumatized them. But this is where hypnosis comes in. You can do it in trance. You can meet so for example, if somebody's abused, you can meet your abuser in trance. You can kind of do the revenge thing, and the hypnotist can kind of make clear, like, you're not going to do this in real life. And
I feel like there's a Disney version of this where you just chase the leopard out of town or something like that.
Yeah, and that actually might be good enough. That actually, because you like leopards, you know what I mean? So yeah, so that might be good enough. But also, I am not saying that revenge is the process by which we de-traumatize. I think it just might be the original process by which our ancestors de-traumatized.
Well, it's closure. Isn't that just all that it is, right? It's the sewing up of the box of the experience where you were victimized by something and then you end up in a position where you will never be victimized again. And that's the position where you can walk forward from with strength.
Also, it doesn't, I'm not totally up to date on this literature, but when I was looking into this a while ago, it doesn't seem like there's actually a link between fantasy and reality. Like, people play violent video games doesn't mean they're going to go commit school shootings. Like, there isn't that link. People are always looking for it and they can't really find it. And, you know, people love horror movies. They love haunted houses and all these like mock terror things, right?
And I do think that we have a tendency to want to sanitize our internal states to the degree that even thinking that you would do something bad to somebody is bad, let alone doing it. And so I think that there's a good and useful place for this sort of imagination because you go through it and then you let it go and you're able to diffuse it and it doesn't live inside of you. Because the next step of that would be to allow it to ferment inside of you, and then you start plotting and you start buying guns and you start making plans, and that's creepy and weird, and we should probably help people avoid that.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of the thing people will always say, don't announce some project until it's actually underway, or the accomplishment until it's over, because you actually get a sense just by saying, if I'm like, hey, I'm writing a book, it's like, I've almost done it when I say that, right? It's almost like it's been done, and I'm like, maybe I won't even write it because everybody already knows about it anyways, and I've already gotten the kick that it's almost like by saying things and acting it out, they happen in some real sense inside of you.
And so that's the reason that people are afraid of violent thoughts, because they're worried that that's going to actually get manifest?
I'm actually arguing that having those violent thoughts out and seeing them through to fruition in your own imagination, it has a way of making them real to you in a way that they don't need to manifest in the physical world.
If I can mention something, is that what's weird is this is a subject of healthy debate in hypnosis, because when you have someone in trance, you can make any suggestion. Like, you can make any suggestion to them. So, for example, what if you had somebody who has a fear of public speaking? And so I could say to you, like, imagine yourself as the world's greatest public speaker. And they would be able to see that. Now, what the rule in hypnosis, though, so if all our visualizations became true, then like 15 minutes later, that person's the world's greatest public speaker. Well, that wouldn't be the case, probably. But the rule we have is it must be resourced, and resourcing is actually a calibrated measurement. Meaning, what I would probably do with somebody who wants to be a better public speaker is I would say, "Have you done any public speaking?" "Yes, I once spoke in my university class, and I wasn't that bad." "Okay, well, what did you do?" I organized my thoughts." "Okay, there's our resource." And then in trance, we go, "Okay, remember how you organized your thoughts and you were good at it and people liked you, and now let's take it a step further. Now you're a bigger audience. Now you're, enunciating it. You add in, and so this resource principle causes the manifestation of the original imagined idea. And that's kind of the rule, because, like, again, you can make any suggestion, but will it happen? Like, a really interesting example of this, and I'll get in trouble for saying this, but it's worth mentioning because it's interesting. There's a huge controversy about conversion therapy. And let me be very clear. I am not for conversion therapy. But if you look up in the literature, you go back and you look at examples of hypnosis used to I don't know, not convert, but maybe to solve homosexuality. There were a bunch of studies done in the 60s, I believe, 60s and 70s, where they hypnotized people who had homosexual urges. Those people stopped being homosexuals. Now, but here's the thing. I don't know what the follow-up would be. So I've done this many times, where I can put people in trance. I can make them sexually attracted to lawn furniture. They will be. They'll be like, you can make them sexually attracted to anything. So you can alter sexual orientation in trance. But the truth is, and I think this is the truth, is that it's the resource state. Deep down, what are they? If they are gay, deep down, yes, in trance, you can temporarily make them heterosexual. You can also, let's say, make a convincing argument. There's also a social argument for maybe they might want to be heterosexual. So it continues for a while. But they will then default back to the deeper resource state of who they really are. But see, what I say gets me in trouble is, like, I'm like, conversion therapy works. I can if somebody came to me saying they didn't want to be gay anymore, I could probably make them not gay. I wouldn't want to do it, but I think it's just possible.
But it sounds like if it's an under-resourced state, then they would revert back to their underlying preference at some point.
Right, but you see, if they really wanted it, you could then address that and go step by step until, like, you've kind of gone all the way. But yes, but I would still say if we're going to be honest, your sexual orientation is gay, despite the fact you're now living as a heterosexual.
I mean, there is one small caveat to this, right? Because you can't, this only works on some portion, like, of the population. People who, like you said, want to do it. it's not something you can just foist on people, right?
Yeah. So there's a whole other kettle of fish. So I think it's worth mentioning because I love the premise of the show is to demystify, and so the reason why hypnosis is so mystical and mystified in our culture, and I'm going to suggest to you that unlike many other phenomena, hypnosis is widely misunderstood. Like most people don't understand hypnosis. I would say more people understand rocket science than understand hypnosis. And the reason is partly because of the hypnotizability issue. So that basically a third of the population, roughly, some people say a quarter or a third, can achieve deep trance very quickly. The term, which is itself a confusing term, is those people are somnambulant, which comes from the confusion around sleepwalking, where they noticed there was a correlation between sleepwalking and hypnotizability, but it's not the same thing. It's often the same thing, but not necessarily. So because you go to an event and you'll see like, wow, like a certain part of the group had this crazy stuff happen to them, but the majority didn't. There's a kind of, it gives people inspiration to think, oh, it's bunk. Or there's also this false premise that strong-minded people, intelligent people, critical thinkers wouldn't be vulnerable to hypnosis, which is also bunk. There's like some really clear examples. So let's say even strong people. Well, one of the greatest examples, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson did hypnosis all the time, bragged about it. He was a great hypnotic subject. I don't think Mike Tyson is weak, nor is he weak-minded. So that has created some of the confusion. I would say culturally, there are institutions that are hostile to hypnosis too, namely the Catholic Church. And I would say it's because they're in the same business. They do this thing, they have the incense, lots of mystique, eye fixation, stare at the cross. It's all the same. Everything the Catholic Church does is out of kind of like the Hypnosis 101 rule book, but they do it as part of their sermon.
But those strong people, the Tysons, they're willingly interested in going along with the program, right? They trust the person that they're working with. Yes. They have their goals, their itinerary, and they're not just letting someone muck around in their brain willy-nilly, I assume.
Well, like trance and flow state seem like they're related to me. And someone who accomplishes great things must be someone that has access to flow state on a regular basis. And so
it's kind of, the memory thing is really interesting there too, right? Like fighters, they'll get done and they'll be like, I have no idea what just happened, essentially. I mean, they have been hit in the head a bunch, but it happens too. Like we play music too, and you'll play a show and maybe you're up there for an hour and then you get off and it feels like it was 5 minutes. Honestly, it's wild.
So and that's classically one of the measurements. I mean, I just had a client right now who said it was like an hour, because obviously it was like an hour session, and they said I thought it was 5 minutes. And so time distortion is one of the signs that you are in trance. So yeah, that's real. This is I think what you're heading towards is I think people believe that hypnosis is a peculiar and maybe discrete state, when in fact it's happening all the time. People, and it happens in different ways. There's enormous amounts of diversity in trance. There are diverse ways to go into trance, and there are diverse kinds of trances.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to get into. Is it seems as some sort of fundamental state of mind that is really important to the development of humanity and really important to our everyday lives. And I want to kind of explore the role of this in our everyday lives. By the way, if we get interrupted, I just want to tell people we are expecting some hypnotic subjects at some point, and so we will have to pause and continue with this if that happens in the next few minutes. We're kind of waiting for them to show up. But yeah, humanity, hypnotism.
I want to expand that a tiny bit, and I want to see if we can add in more of an evolutionary connection, because I know you can also hypnotize animals.
Sorry, say that again.
You can also hypnotize animals.
Of course, yes. Chickens famously, and yeah, absolutely, and sharks and alligators too. I haven't tried it myself. Yeah,
So it seems like it has a really important biological role.
yeah. Okay, so let me explain something crazy, if you don't mind. Like, I was surprised as much as anybody else. I did this TEDx, and now it's at 11 million views. But I think this is why. Let me explain why I think it's not just my charisma. I'm joking. That
It's the beard.
it's the beard, it's the hair. It's because for centuries there's been this chase on what is the model to explain hypnosis. And it would go like this, it would go like, so for 100 years, I thought eye fixation, staring at stuff. But, it's true, staring at stuff does kind of put you into trance. At one point, they thought boring people, because you can bore people into trance. That's back to the church angle. That's one way to put people in the trance. Then Mesmer thought animal magnetism. It was something closer to the concept of qi and Chinese traditional Chinese medicine. So there's all these competing models, and they all explain like a part. Eye fixation makes sense. It just doesn't explain the whole thing. It doesn't explain sort of the wonder of it too. So what I did, and I should explain. I didn't. It's not like I figured it all out all by myself, but I put together things that came from different places in one TEDx. And I think it sort of blew people's minds. And let me explain what it is. It's the sudden connection of dreaming, so the dream state, and hypnosis. And the reason this is because when you put people into deep trance, their eyes roll up and their eyes flicker almost exactly in the same way as somebody who's in REM state sleep. And when you understand that, you understand sort of everything. So let me give you like a weird example. When you go to a stage hypnosis show, like there's this weird aspect of it is that, people snap their fingers, they pull someone's arm, and the person flops over like this. Well, why are they flopping over like that? Well, the explanation is that if hypnosis is like REM state dreaming, and hypnotherapy is essentially a managed waking dream state that can be modified, then when people dream, and there's no appropriate term for this that I know of anyways, they experience something, it's sometimes called sleep paralysis because their body is paralyzed. And the explanation for that is that if your body was not paralyzed while you had one of the many typical dreams, like running, jumping, attacking, or whatever, you would run out of bed and hit the wall, or you would attack the person that you're sleeping with, or whatever. So you're in a paralyzed state. So in a stage hypnosis show, you're seeing sleep paralysis. You're seeing the person, because if you ask those people, we can demonstrate this. If you ask those people who are like this and appear to be deeply asleep, can they hear you? They will go, yeah, I can hear everything. They are alert. So that's what in this TEDx, that's what I suggested, is that dreaming and hypnosis are linked. That's not in the scientific literature. In fact, I had a bunch of like psychotherapists and psychologists, and I did that TEDx, like took the trouble to call me up and tell me that I was wrong. And they said that PET scans or MRIs do not show that REM state hypnosis and REM state dreaming are the same thing, which is not what I said. I didn't say they are the same thing. I think we know that we borrow and modify from different aspects of behavior. They're not exactly the same. But if you use the metaphor that hypnosis is a kind of waking dream that can be managed, everything makes sense. Everything makes sense.
I would also wonder if lucid dreaming wouldn't have different aspects of the brain activated than regular dreaming. Because hypnosis seems more like lucid dreaming because there's a control module that's in place that isn't there during regular dreaming.
Yeah. Well, one of the weird things, not people are different, but one of the weird things that people report, and this is an example of like phenomena that nobody investigates, I don't know why, but is that when they start to lucid dream, they might notice this twitching behavior. That's how they know they're going in. Or there's a second factor. They notice an intensification of imagery. That's a sign that they're going into a lucid dream. Well, when people go into trance, same thing, they start to twitch. They also see images more vividly. And it's called idiomotor signals. That's the term for it. But nobody knows, like, and if you ask like hypnotists or you ask scientists, like, what's going on? Why, as I see these people going to trance, to this weird twitching thing? You don't need to go into trance. You can just be sleepy. You're just sleepy, you tend to twitch a bit. What I think we are seeing, I sometimes always go for the most obvious answer, is the interface between here's me alert and awake, here's me asleep and in trance, and then in between there's sleep paralysis. And I'm kind of like on the switch. And so it's like I'm jerking around. That's my explanation, but there is no formal scientific explanation for it.
Well, it's really interesting because the mainstream explanation for REM sleep functionally is that it's important in consolidation of memories.
Yeah.
And, if you're talking about essentially manipulating memories when it comes to dealing with trauma and deprioritizing them and so forth, it makes sense that there's a shared circuit in that case.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. That's why that protocol we described works, is because what you're doing, like, this is a well-known principle in neuroscience, that when people remember things, it has to be reconsolidated. So what we did in that protocol is we removed all the color, made the tag black and white. Now it gets reconsolidated as an ineffectual, unimportant tag. Therefore, it's no longer triggerable. Usually. It's
interesting because people do tend to, like, they test people's memories and they find that actually their memory is of the last time they had the memory. And you have this game of telephone, essentially, where maybe after 15 years, what you think is your memory of the event is just your,
memory of a memory.
Really distorted, long winding road of memories consolidated into one memory, which isn't even close to accurate anymore.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and that's because of this peculiar. This is why people misremember things so often. But you're onto something really, really interesting that I think is is also another crux issue, which is what sort of the principle of why people another reason why people misunderstand hypnosis. The biggest cliche that people have about hypnosis is this thing about turning people into chickens. So people say this all the time when they find out I'm a hypnotist. Are you going to turn me into a chicken? Now this is going to bring us back to dreaming in a second. So you mentioned that. So the scientific explanation for dreaming is REM state consolidation. I think that's true. What I think the problem with science sometimes is they want to go like it's only this. Dreaming's a big affair. A lot of things happen in dreaming, and what they're forgetting, what is obvious from a hypnosis point of view, is the educational component of dreaming. Let me explain. So I want to do a whole show about turning people into chickens because I had this big epiphany, and let me explain. Like, why the chicken? Why is it so funny? Why does everybody get turned into chicken? Why is it such a trope? Well, when you turn someone into a chicken, I never used to turn people into chickens because I was like, I'm a classy hypnotist. That's too, whatever, street corner hypnosis. But I was at a cocktail party once. People found out I was a hypnotist. They said, "Can you hypnotize us?" I hypnotized a bunch of people. Then they said, can you turn somebody into a chicken?" So I did. And it just happened it was a crowded party. And the guy that I turned into a chicken was like a tall young man. He was just big. He was a big guy. Suddenly, there was a 200-pound chicken in the room. And I remember, it wasn't just me, but I remember people were scared. Because we were all close. He was moving like a chicken, clucking like a chicken, but he was 200 pounds of chicken. It was kind of an intense experience. And after that, I was like, whoa, why? And I remember feeling fear, like this chicken could get out of control. And so let me explain what's powerful here. What we experienced is something that's actually, it's a very profound concept. That's a rare term that should be more popular. Term is called dream neutrality. That I just looked it up at the time. Ever since when I did this TEDx, I looked it up and I found dream neutrality. And since then, the term has disappeared. Maybe it's memory reconsolidation. But what dream neutrality means is that our dreams represent a kind of truthful dream landscape. So, for example, we may dream about being hunted by wolves because we live in an environment where there's wolves. And so, for example, this is why kids have nightmares. That's an interesting mystery. Why do kids have nightmares? Because their unconscious is warning them about what's out there. And wolves and lions and leopards want to take your kids away. Like, that's real. That would have been real in the savannah. And so the kid has a dream that he's being chased by wolves, and then maybe figures out that he should climb a tree, and wolves can't climb trees. Then, so that's the dream. Then it happens in the real world. A kid gets chased by wolves, climbs a tree, escapes, passes on his genes. Right? Now, let me bring this back to dream neutrality. If you don't believe your dreams, so if you have the dream and the wolves are chasing you and you're like, but I'm just dreaming, I don't care, chase me all you want, wolves, you're just a figment of my dream imagination, then you don't learn the lesson. You don't experience the critical educational component of dreaming, which is that it scares the shit out of you so you find answers to your problems. That part of dreaming, as far as I know, like I'm not an expert on science of dreaming, is rarely discussed or not known. That is, it's teaching us lessons. And it is the explanation for why people become chickens. Because hypnosis is a waking dream. I'm managing a dream where that guy is dreaming that he is a chicken. He believes the dream, so he becomes 100% a chicken, which is why it's so funny, because there's Bob thinking he's a chicken. He doesn't know he's not because of dream neutrality. So it's like this weird, profound aspect of the whole thing. That's
fascinating. There's this other element too, where I realized while we were talking about that I don't know, I think other people experience this too, but my dreams seem to be half and half first person and movie-like, which is really interesting when I was thinking about that film projector narration, because you do seamlessly switch between being the actor in the dream and sort of watching things happen. And I wonder if that's not what's happening, is, you know, deprioritizing or moving these things around. Like, the wolves chase you the first time, you don't get away. Maybe that's not something you need to hang on to, so it gets turned into a movie and filed away. Or, yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if anybody's studied that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's really interesting. I mean, I know in NLP that's a really important thing, which is the point of view of an experience. But I think you're onto something there. That is like, why is it that we dream, or we sometimes dream of ourselves in the third person, or any of that is probably because that would be more educational. I think dreams
start paying more attention to that.
Yeah.
So how does the guy turning into a chicken violate dream neutrality?
It doesn't violate dream neutrality. It's explained by dream neutrality, meaning, as I understand what the term means, is that dreams reflect the reality of our environment. And that they are merciless. So that's why you actually do die a lot in your dreams, because that's what's out there. Big predators who want to eat you. So it's not that it violates dream neutrality, but the fact that I believe my dreams is required for me to learn from them. That's dream neutrality, if I'm explaining it right.
And so when the guy turns into a chicken, you're watching somebody who believes the dream so much that they're free from the sleep paralysis aspect of it.
Yes.
And so you're watching someone who is living out an internal state that is made real, which normally is just relegated to your own dream experience?
Yes. Yes to all that. Yeah, that's right. The guy who's a chicken fully believes the dream, which is why it is funny, because if he was like, I know I'm a chicken, then he'd just be acting.
Yeah.
And two, he's fully invested in it and can't in a sense, while he's in the dream, cannot break out of it, but will come out of it much like a dreamer would. You know, if he falls over, or the hypnotist says you are no longer a chicken, then he's like, he's out of it, and he might remember, I was a chicken 5 minutes ago, and we'll feel whatever he feels about it. But again, yes, like there's no science about this as far as I could tell. I've researched it, and still, like, I also think, as you pointed out, memory consolidation is the bigger theory. That's the one everybody talks about, and I believe that's true. But what I find ironic, it's almost like dreaming is in competition with the education system. So we don't want to admit that dreaming is educational. Dreaming is educational, and it's not only is educational. It's like a holodeck. Like Star Trek, the holodeck, where everything you feel in real is passionate and emotional and dramatic. So you're going to learn much faster. You're going to learn fast in your dreams because things are so real. Now, people are going to say, "Wait a second! I have dreams where I'm, falling into a volcano, eating marshmallows, being chased by aliens." Yeah, some of our dreams make no sense. I think that's part of dreaming. They're not all purposeful.
I remember Shiloh at some point during grad school started having a recurring dream that, was it my mom who killed somebody and was making you bury the body? Or was it you that killed somebody? And
Unclear who killed who.
He would just wake up and my mom's this like very sweet, tiny little lady. And he's like, yeah, we were burying bodies all night.
Yeah. So this might also explain the confusion around this issue. Like not all dreams have direct meaning or even
but I don't know. I'm like, that must mean something.
Right? Some of them are good. Like sometimes you have a wonderful dream, and so it's not like you're trying to clean out that memory necessarily.
I don't buy that dreams are meaningless.
Oh, no.
Right? So I think that there is deep meaning. I think that it's often hard to unpack that. And I'm sure that there's some functional aspect to it, right? And if you're talking about a scientific explanation, the scientific explanation always has to come down to there's a functional aspect to this. Do not worry. It is not just a random thing that happens in your head. And we need that in order to be able to construct whatever, Dreamatron 3000 technology will emerge from the scientific understanding so that you can live to be 4,000 years old or whatever. And so, okay, fine. But I think that there's also a portion of it that is just the subconscious. It's just processing things that have happened and trying to not consolidate them to memory, but reprocess them so that you can make changes. Because we talk a lot about this question of where do ideas come from? And the idea appears to come from nowhere. If you've ever been sitting somewhere and you have a piece that you're trying to write, or you are working on a song or a poem or a math problem, whatever, you sit still for long enough and it emerges. Or you go for a walk and it emerges, but you stop looking at the paper and suddenly the answer becomes clear. And that's a very, very strange thing. And I think that somehow hypnosis is linked to that, because what it's doing is it is opening up that part of you where imagination comes from, but is allowing someone to puppet it a little bit on the backside.
Yeah. Yes, it's giving us access and management tools for something that's normally uncontrolled and wild. But I was going to add, just because it's such an interesting subject, I was going to add something to what you're saying, which is just that I do a lot of sleep work, and I really noticed, like, a lot of people have insomnia, and I've noticed that as you fall asleep, there's a really interesting part of the experience where first your thoughts are more literal. So it's like you think about the things of your day, the things you're worried about, or things you want to do, whatever. That's literal. And then there's this weird moment where the odd imagery, foreign imagery, often intrudes. It's as if somebody's opened a door and now all this weird stuff comes in. That is the sign that you are falling asleep. And what it feels like is that you're tuning into what it feels like a river of consciousness that isn't yours. It's the river. And when you tune into the river of consciousness, then you, for some reason, that allows you to let go of your, prefrontal cortex and kind of drop into dreaming or sleeping. I don't think you dream right away, but you sleep right away.
Is there a similar process that happens to people as they enter into a trance state? Of the immersion into this river, the immersion into something that doesn't totally belong to them, or is that separate?
I think you can. That's something that more you could do optionally, where you could say to somebody that you're looking into across a portal or a void, and you're seeing what's there. Generally, you're more in the business of being fairly precise because you you don't want people to fall off the edges, so to speak. In my experience, because everything's out there. Like when people ask me what you can do in hypnosis, my answer is if you can dream it, you can do it. So that means everything is there. So you can have nightmares too. Definitely you can have negative experiences.
Seems like the dream work thing is really out of vogue in mainstream psychotherapy, right? Like,
yeah,
it's associated with Freud. Everybody's like, Freud was a good idea, but it's not the best idea.
Well, people want something that works. And they think that what works is going to a therapist every single week for the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, it could be just the dreams are ridiculously difficult to make sense of, too. And some of them just are meaningless, right? The volcano monster, marshmallow guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, right, I don't know. I don't know if there is, maybe it's not that they're meaningless. It's just that nobody's established a proper way to make sense of them in a widespread, workable fashion.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is, again, in science, generally we want specific and precise answers. And part of the problem is that, like dreaming, it goes kind of all over the place. But like, I can tell you a funny story. My daughter has a cat that she loves, and the cat ran away or seemed to disappeared one day. And she became very despondent and depressed. And we put ads in papers. We wrote posts everywhere, and nobody had seen the cat. And I was literally preparing a speech where I was going to say to my daughter, it was a month later, it's time to let go, and the cat's not coming back. And my daughter had a dream where she felt like he was out there and she had to do more. And my daughter, being a teenager, hates Facebook, and decided that moment, I'm even going to put up a Facebook post. So she started a Facebook account and posted on Facebook, "Have you seen this cat?" after having the dream. And that night, somebody responded and sent a picture and said, "Is this your cat?" And it was. And it was all in effect as a result of her dream. Mm. And like, I did this whole documentary, by the way. I was utterly skeptical. I don't want to get into it too much, but about people who dreamt about 9/11 before it happened. A lot of people dreamt about 9/11 before it happened. How can you explain that? That's like pretty weird. And I interviewed them. I was very skeptical, interrogatory, and they were being honest. A lot of times people who dreamt about 9/11 went to their therapist, told their therapist what the dream, the therapist wrote it down, dated it. It was before the events of 9/11, and it was very close to the event. How is that explainable? That's another episode.
Yeah, we could go deep on that. Hey, so it looks like one of our hypnotic guests has arrived.
Okay.
Maybe we can take a break and get set up for that. And I also need to use the bathroom really quickly. Yeah,
so let's take a 5-minute bio break, and then we'll let him in, and we'll organize and get the next session.
One thing we've talked about is why the public largely misunderstands hypnosis or believes that it isn't real or it's fakery, when in fact it is entirely real. And one really strange example, like when I was coming to get on the show, is I happened to look up, I don't remember why, but stage hypnosis on Wikipedia. And what was really blew my mind, and I recommend you go look at Wikipedia stage hypnosis under skepticism. You will find this hilarious, to me, hilarious description of stage hypnosis, where they make the case that stage hypnosis is fake. And not only do they make the case that it's fake, they sort of suggest that there's a bunch of people who were stage hypnotists who fooled themselves into believing they were doing something when in fact, and then discovered that it was all fraudulent, as if, much like, let's say, a criminal realizes the error of their ways or something. And so what's amazing about this, and then it goes on for quite a bit and more detail about that they think that stage hypnosis is sleight of hand, or that the use of stooges, where you can have a plant who pretends they're a chicken. And let me be clear. Not only is stage hypnosis real, but I would say almost all stage hypnosis is real, meaning people are genuinely hypnotized. Now, sometimes people will bring in or try to bring in people they know that will respond well. So there can be a stooge element, but that's because they want their show to work, and that they don't have a show, they don't get paid, or whatever it is. But it is a real thing. Stage hypnosis is real. And another weird example of it is that in the scientific community, there are scientific hypnotists who declare that stage hypnosis is dangerous. Well, they also think it's real. They just think it's dangerous too. So it's just amazing that people think, and Wikipedia would seem to support this, that hypnosis is not a real phenomena. So I thought I would invite, these are a couple of people I've met in different situations who happen to be pretty good hypnotic subjects. And we're going to see that even over Zoom, that people can respond to hypnotic suggestion. I guess we'll see if that happens, but I think it will. And show that I'm going to try to do the best of my ability to show you that it is real. It's not fake, because I keep having to do this. And here's maybe a good opportunity to try to see if we can show some phenomena.
That's what's really, I mean, I appreciate that. This is one of the things I loved about Darren Brown too, is that he shows you how he picks the most susceptible people, and it's still amazing. He'll go through these huge screening campaigns, like boil 1,000 people down to 1 or something. And it's still amazing. So I hear what you're saying, that and by the way, how did you select these people? Were they particularly susceptible in your?
So they're just also available.
And available, of course.
Yeah. Probably one is a client, but actually, no, that's actually a really good question. Both of these people fly in the face of one of the common stereotypes of hypnotizability. So one of the stereotypes is that hypnotizable people are somehow weak-minded. That their minds are manipulated into these altered states, or and so one fellow is a doctor, is a practicing doctor, and the other runs a chain of 7 stores, amazing stores in Ontario. These are, I would say, not weak-minded people by any stretch, and so I thought they would be great examples. And yet, when they are ready to do it and they consent and they want to do it, they can go into deep hypnotic trance where they change. And I would say what they're showing is a virtue, not a weakness. It is better to be hypnotizable than to be not hypnotizable, in my opinion.
Check. Got it. All right. Well, let's get in here. This, just a second. What's that? Back to it. Hello. Can you hear us?
Hello. Yeah. Hi.
Oh, there we go.
Hi there.
Hi, Ram.
Hey, Albert.
Hey.
How's everything?
Very good.
Awesome. Exciting.
Welcome, Ramiro. Yes. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Exciting stuff.
I should point out that that Ram is in London. That's why it's dark outside. He's ahead there on the schedule.
Wow. Well, thank you all the more for braving the strange hours and hanging out with some Americans.
My pleasure. No, of course. Thank you for having me.
We don't talk as well as the Brits, but we're every bit as fun.
Actually, more fun. Americans are known to be much more fun than the British.
Yeah. Ram grew up partly in Chicago, so he knows that.
Oh, yeah. And just quick introductions. This is Anastasia. I'm Shiloh, and we'll kind of stay out of the way and let Albert do his thing. But we're very happy to have you here, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Is Derek here as well, or we're still waiting for Derek to arrive?
We're still waiting for Derek, so we could maybe just
sure. So I should explain RAM. We worked together with hypnotherapy. We had a very specific goal that we used hypnotherapy for. It wasn't to do show weird phenomena, but to demonstrate, not to demonstrate, but RAM is a doctor in Bolivia, and he's moved to the UK and had to pass the board exams, which are not easy. And so we used hypnotherapy, and I'm glad to say that Ram passed the first set of board exams with flying colors. Congratulations!
Nice. Thank you.
And I'm not going to say it's all hypnotherapy, but would you say hypnotherapy was a factor?
I'd say it played a huge part. It was also almost decisive. I've tried every type of therapy there is out there, and I should know. But hypnotherapy was a key component to all of that.
Really?
What
Okay.
do you think was different? What was different about hypnotherapy versus conventional therapies in terms of getting prepared for something like this?
Right. I think any journey that you want to embark on, I think, at least for me, there was quite a bit of resistance and opposition. I wasn't really able to completely focus and, put my mind in a blank. I think there was a lot of self-sabotage from my part. It was a pretty tricky process to grasp and to understand, but eventually through hypnotherapy, I was more able to let go, if that makes any sense. I was more able to blank my mind and sort of shut down all those mechanisms that reminded me how much of a failure I was. Like, that's the self-sabotage part, even though it's not conscious, it was there. And I didn't realize until I actually made it through therapy. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a super common phenomenon of doing anything that's really difficult, right? So you have, I think it's imposter syndrome is what it's called. And it's just the conviction that you don't deserve to be where you are. You don't deserve to have what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so it's interesting to be able to take that and through something like hypnotherapy to be able to turn it on its head, because it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult to fix with conventional therapy. But we were talking earlier about the fact that conventional therapy has a hard time with fixing things because it's often like workbook based, right? Like if you go to like CBT or something, which is one of the best evidence-based practices for therapy and for healing and whatever you want to call it, but it's a very dry and kind of emotionally disconnected process of fixing things. And hypnosis, on the other hand, seems very much like a mechanic opening the hood of the car and just being like, all right, what do we have here? And then messing around with it. And so I wonder, what are the things that you saw change? Was it just focus, or was it this conviction about deserving what you wanted?
Right. That's a really good question. I've been through CBT myself, actually, like 10 years ago or 11 years ago. And it still remains, I think, the gold standard for any conventional therapy. Some might argue with or without medication as well. But I think hypnosis and CBT basically go really well hand in hand. It's sort of like a holistic approach, albeit they're pretty much on either end of the spectrum. Like, for instance, I think CBT for me was a grueling process. It's a very active process that basically goes against everything in your mind, at least. Everything that you're afraid of, or all the resistance that you create in order to not achieve anything, or any sort of situation that actually put you in the mindset that you currently are, which is what could be depression, could be anxiety, it could be a ton of other psychological diagnoses and then stuff like that. But CBT sort of pushes you to the boundaries of things that you endure and basically desensitizes you to a degree that's extremely uncomfortable. But it's proven to work. I mean, it really did work wonders for me up to a certain point. I'm at a point in my life where I sort of needed to go search elsewhere for the therapy that I needed, for the support that I was craving, but I didn't really know I was craving. So that's where hypnotherapy goes. And I felt personally, I think that hypnotherapy it helped me let go of things that I couldn't control, that were out of my control. I just accepted things. And in order to do that without struggling, the one key thing is to shut down those voices in your head that tell you, like the imposter syndrome that you mentioned, right? You're not good enough, or you're not capable, or look at that history of, I don't know, failures that you might have had ever since you were a child, right? I think everything goes back to trauma in one way or another. But I think hypnotherapy just let you live with that elephant in the room. And once everything goes quiet and you achieve that certain inner peace, I think I should call it, because it really, you just let go and try to focus on what your mind wants to wonder. And once you do that, you achieve the path of no resistance. And that's where you actually do some healing, which is opposed to CBT, which is actually pushing you to the boundaries, right?
If I can chime in a bit, what I remember a little bit, some of the work we did is we did a lot of things, but one of the basic protocols we did was that I do this thing called movie therapy, which is not as weird as it sounds. Basically, the idea is imagine the movie that you want. So the movie was very simple. You pass the exams in a successful way, because these are very tough exams, very, very tough, very challenging, and the circumstances of the exams are very stressful. So what we do is you go into trance and you imagine the movie where you succeed, see it. But then we do something interesting. A lot of movie metaphors here. Then you rewind the movie and we ask your unconscious mind what you had to do to make that happen. And the unconscious mind tends to be more honest. It tends to it actually manifests this other movie where it says, well, yeah, you're going to have to do a lot of studying, or you're going to have to make sure you sleep well, or you're going to have to make sure you're not stressed when you're in the exam. And then that's basically what we did. So like we asked Ram's unconscious what he kind of needed to do, and then we made sure that those things happened. And then essentially the movie came true.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember very, very clearly. It's sort of like you take these things for granted because it's really obvious that you have to get a certain, decent amount of sleep, quality sleep. Get your exercise, proper diet. But for some reason, it's something that I didn't really envision. I didn't think it was a hurdle in my step. I always thought that the biggest hurdle was going to be learning the concepts, learning how to take the test or whatever your objective might be. And you sort of adopt this tunnel vision and take all the rest for granted when it's actually much simpler than that. And that's what hypnotherapy actually helped me. It's helped me relax, and I was able to have a panoramic view of what I actually needed, but was taken for granted. And that helped tremendously. I didn't realize until that point.
The visualization aspect of it is really interesting to me. I don't know, are either of you familiar with something called the Silva method?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Silva method was I think that it's a form of self-hypnosis that was developed by a guy named Jose Silva back in the 70s. He decided that he was going to teach his children to have what amounts to paranormal abilities in terms of mind reading and mind control. And I don't necessarily buy the apocryphal stories of what he was able to grant to his children of, healing touch powers. But one of our listeners was actually such a devotee of the Silva method. And he had taken it a long time ago. And he was really...
Shout out now.
Shout out to Nico, yeah. Nico basically was like, you have to take this, and I will sponsor you to take it. And so he signed me up for one of these Silva courses. And for him, it was, he wanted me to experience something that they do at the end of each Silva course, which is something called case studies, where they pair people up. So you basically go through this entire process, which is just training you to do visualization. And so they have a lot of these same exercises that it sounds like you guys were doing it in hypnosis, which is that you progressively over the course of probably like 18 hours or so, you learn to do visualization exercises that gradually get you into a deeper and deeper state. And you construct this mind palace where you go and you have a screen that's inside the mind palace, and you're able to do all kinds of things on the screen. Like there's a couple of things that are, I think one of them is called mirror of the mind technique, which is that you visualize the condition which you're in right now and you think about all the things that are wrong with it. And then you take that away and you replace it with a different mirror and you change the color of the mirror. And when you change the color of the mirror, you think about what life would look like had you achieved all of the things that you want. You meditate on the goals that you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve them. So there's a huge amount of it that's just visualization. And I think it's very effective, first of all, because it puts you in a position where you don't just have this abstract desire for something. You have an abstract desire that you have concretized into steps. I will go here. I will do this. This is the stage upon which I will perform these actions. These actions, if performed in this sequence, will culminate in this event, and this event is what I want. And you think about getting that event, and you think about how much you want it. And then when you go out into the world and your choice is between, I don't know, eating bonbons or reading anatomy, you choose to read anatomy because you have trained inside of yourself that you have this outcome that you want, and you have connected action to outcome. And it seems like the Silva method offers you the ability to do it yourself as opposed to going to somebody. But I imagine that it's a different relationship when you have somebody from the outside who's guiding you through it. But with an outsider or doing it by yourself, it seems like there's something that's incredibly powerful about the act of seeing a future that you want and helping it get you there. But I wanted to add something about the case studies, which is that, like, I had some weird experiences that I haven't talked about on the podcast before during the case studies, which was one, there was a sequence of the course where you're supposed to visualize your pet and basically put them up on the screen, and you go through all of the anatomical systems of the pet. And when we were doing this exercise, I got this weird feeling in my left eye. And I thought that there was something in the room that was like light that was bouncing off of something. And so I opened my eyes. There wasn't anything in the room. I kept doing it. It was fine. And then a few minutes later, there was a break and I walked out and my cat had something in her left eye. And I was like, that's weird. And then the other half of the case studies was that you had these, you paired up into groups of two and you went into this trance state. And the other person that you were paired with had a piece of paper on which you had a couple of identifying characteristics of a person out in the world, as well as some medical information about them. And so the idea was that you would visualize this person, and the person who was in the trance would read what was on the card at a distance, and then after having diagnosed the ailment, then would send healing energy to the person to fix them, right? So it's this like multi-step process. And it was really weird because most of the people in class got pretty close to what was on the cards. And so you would get just two pieces of information. You'd get name and you'd get age. And then off of those two things, you would then, again, imagine the person on the screen inside of your head. You would think about what parts of them seemed to you like they were in pain. And then you would tell this to your partner. The partner would write it down. And at the end, you would compare notes to see how close you got. And it wasn't perfect, but it was really spooky how close it was. And it's kind of been spinning around in my head because I feel like it connects to hypnosis and visualization and telekinesis and all of these different paranormal things that we have no mechanism for talking about. And we can talk about them in the most prosaic possible sense of, I visualized something, I made a plan, and I made it happen. But I guess, Ramira, my question is, did you feel like there was something spiritual or beyond the physical that was associated with the process of hypnosis?
And we're going to get all those mystifying science comments now.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a good question. Well, for starters, I think hypnosis was definitely the first time I tried it was with Albert. The first few times, got to be honest. I mean, it took a little bit of work for my part. I was subconsciously, I did put a little bit of resistance, and it was going for a few sessions, I remember. And then after, I remember, what was it, Albert? Like a few sessions in, we started doing breath work, which helped tremendously as well. And that sort of gave me something to focus on. And the whole process was much, much easier. And I remember in one of those few sessions where the trance, I'm guessing you could call it trance because it's a state of deep relaxation. It almost feels like the moment you're about to fall asleep, but for some reason you just jolt back up in bed.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like that part of the relaxation process, but more prolonged. So it's a really, really nice feeling. And sometimes there's something. One of the few times that I actually experienced was depersonalization. I could visualize myself next to me, and it was my voice basically guiding my mind into all of these scenarios. Very random. I mean, something that I couldn't really explain why I would jump to these certain scenarios and events in my life. But I would just listen to that voice, and I think that's as close as I've ever gotten spiritually. I mean, that sense that you are taking care of yourself under this deep meditation, deep trance is as spiritual as it can get, I think. No other therapy has ever even come close to doing that. But I think it's also a lot of components, a lot of variables that went into it as therapy went along. And you achieve a place where it gets easier. And the easier it gets, the better you start molding your mind. There's a lot of neuroplasticity going on. And it's been proven that neuroplasticity does occur in these deep trance-like waves, which I think are theta waves, if I'm not mistaken. But they really do provide what you're telling me, and that's as deep as something unexplainable as I personally got. But I would definitely resonate with the fact that there is something that you can't really explain. It's very deeply personal and spiritual. If you try these types of therapies, you eventually do get to a point where it's just come whatever may, and it's really relaxing. It's a revelation.
I'm sold.
What I would add to that is, I was mentioning, you interestingly mentioned the Silva method. I think yes, the Silva method is. I don't think it is hypnosis. Just it borrows from, or there's lots of crossover parallels. But one really clear crossover, and this is interesting, I think, is that we live in a profoundly linguistic culture. Language really matters. Where does the language happen? It's up here. It's very. It's not entirely a conscious process, but it's a very controlled process. Controlling language is what we kind of do all day long. And what's interesting is, like, one of the ways that you hypnotize people is you simply switch to visual imagery. You just say, instead of talking about words, so for example, a bad hypnotist uses non-visual words. A good hypnotist uses balloons open, visual metaphors exploding from fountains, because the minute people start thinking in pictures, it activates a different part of the brain, probably. And here's like a crazy thing that I was going to mention that relates to some of our earlier conversation. Again, I don't have the studies, but one of the really weird things about the human brain is the visual cortex is reused by 3 very different processes. And that is weird. So let me explain. We use the visual cortex when we see. We use the visual cortex when we dream. And we also use the visual cortex when we are hypnotized. So getting people into their visual cortex, so to speak, and this is kind of a metaphor because it's not an exact thing, is how one of the ways that you put people in a trance. You just start talking in visual ways, and people start going into trance. But you know what? Like, it's also the same principle. It's exactly like if you sat down with a bunch of toddlers and started telling them a story of a big old bear, walking down the trail, they would start to exhibit trance behavior. They start to become immersed in your story. They start to eye fixation. They may close their eyes. All the same elements of basic hypnotic trance.
We touched on this a little bit, but do you think that this is fundamentally a religious experience?
You mean in the sense that the reason why the Catholic Church, for example, that, like, what's funny? Like, I'll tell you an interesting experience. Public hypnotists such as myself, but other ones, we get hate mail, and everyone mentioned, like, but one of the common themes is that hypnosis is satanic. That's a satanic enterprise. And I explain one of the reasons is because if you really see hypnotized people, sometimes their eyes roll up. It's like, again, looks like you're watching The Exorcist or something like that. But the other reason, I think, is simply competition. The Catholic Church is in the hypnosis business. Religion is in the hypnosis business. So for example, a big principle in hypnosis is the concept of mind tunnels. So that like, for example, when you accept a certain sort of way of thinking, like if I said that you're in a beautiful green forest, everything is green, all the creatures are green, everything good is green, you can go into a mind tunnel where everything good is green, and you can just keep going. And that's a little bit like, I would say, the metaphor for certain religions, where it's basically like a mind tunnel that a person accepts. And so religion doesn't like, and religious people don't like these people that are mobile or see these systems as fluid, or not only that, are exhibiting some of the same phenomena, belief, powerful states of belief. So that's why we come in conflict, and everyone did. Like Anton Mesmer did. All the great hypnotists got in trouble with the religious authorities at the time.
But I mean, in an even older way, because I feel like trance is a state that must predate organized religion.
Yes, the first hypnotists, in my opinion, were shamans. Yeah. Shamans, and I don't mean like, because it's often a very ambiguous term, but shamans. What shamans do traditionally, I come to the shaman with a problem. I've got this recurring stomach ache or whatever it is. The shaman goes into trance for you, accesses the great unconscious, which is also kind of where we get to the more spiritual component of hypnosis, and finds an answer, hopefully, and then brings it back. Now, but there's another part to this too. Hypnosis is somewhat contagious, meaning if I'm in a room where somebody's going into trance, I might feel it and might start going into trance too. And it's also, hypnosis is status oriented. If the shaman occupies a high status in the group or tribe and goes into trance, I will also follow them. So I might go in too. So the shaman puts me in trance by going into trance themselves, is basically what I'm saying. But you're right. I think they are. But there are people who do research on this. The official explanation for the origins of hypnosis are usually the sleep temples in Egypt. So some of the big buildings, temples in Egyptian culture that are still there, were these temples, but they worked on the same principles. They had obsidian, or these sort of like bed areas, and also huge altars. So when you have something to stare at, you have eye fixation. Then they would have people doing physical passes, which is an old style of hypnosis, over them, like hands going over you. And then the Greeks did something very similar. There are a bunch of Greek temples that have spiral rocks all around them, and they're all roughly the same. I think around 5,000. I don't know. Actually, no, maybe I don't know if the age is right. Or like 3,000 years ago, I think. So it was predating Christianity and maybe predating Judaism, some of them. So yeah, like it goes way back.
Should we try some? I'm not sure if our second subject is coming or not.
Let me just see if he wrote. Yeah, there's somebody's on the road. I'll see if he wrote to me. He just said he was running late, so maybe he'll just jump in. But we can, we can try it informally. So I invited Ram just simply because I thought, oh, like Ram's not a dramatic hypnotic subject, but he is good at going into trance. And so I just thought, oh, it'd be good for people to see who aren't familiar with the phenomena what kind of happens, and then we'll see if we can go a bit further and other things that we can do. And we can also talk to him while he's in trance. That's a lot of people often think you can't talk but we can. So we can sort of try a few different things. So let me try one thing very, very, if this is okay with you, Ram. So the eyes are a very important part of hypnosis. That sounds odd, but basically, eye behavior itself is a critical part of what happens to people when they're hypnotized. And so I'll give you an example. As people go into trance, they begin to blink in a particular way. Again, something that's not well known. You don't see too many blink studies. I think blinking is really interesting, but they start to blink in a particular way. And most hypnotists are trained. So, for example, they actually say, and it's a standard expression. So, as people blink, and you notice that Ram actually is blinking, that as they start to blink, you say, "That's right." This is a weird expression, and basically the point of that is that you're saying you're supporting this, which is basically the unconscious slowly coming to the fore. And so this is what I'll do. I'll ask Ram if you don't mind. And first of all, I'll ask Ram if it's okay if we do hypnosis.
Yeah, it's okay.
Are you comfortable are you comfortable and relaxed right now?
Yes.
And do you feel like you're in a safe situation?
Yes.
Okay. So now what I just did is I actually ran what's called a compliance set. A compliance set is actually is more the sales side of hypnosis. If you ask people 3 questions and you get them to say yes, they're already moving towards hypnotic trance. They're already more open to suggestion. It's why when you go to buy a car salesman will not say right away, "Do you want to buy this Ford 150, F-150?" He'll say, "It's a nice day outside, isn't it?" And you'll go, "Yes." "I guess you might be in a market for a car." "Well, why, yes, I am." "And I guess you might be considering our Ford F-150. Say, I've just run what's called a compliance set. And that, I don't know if there's psychological studies, but hypnotists are all trained to know that increases suggestibility. So that's what I did just there. Now I'll ask Ram, so this is maybe the breath work part. I'll ask him to take a deep breath in. So I'll ask you to take a deep breath in, breathing in. And maybe hold that breath for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then release. Just release and relax. Beautiful. I'm just supporting his behavior. And then second, I'll ask you to take an even deeper breath. So now a really deep breath, filling your lungs. And hold this breath for 1, 2, 3. That's right. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now release. Now I'm going to show you something kind of maybe a little bit different. Now I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath in. And when you take that breath in, roll your eyes back as far as you can. Just let your eyes roll back. So you're breathing in, rolling your eyes back. Good. Look at Ram's eyes. Keep rolling your eyes and hold your eyes right there. So if you look at Ram's eyes, you're seeing his eyes roll back. We're seeing kind of, so Ram, I'm just going to ask you to do something. Remain in this state and see if you can lift your lids a little bit. Just lift your lids. There you go. This is the exorcist state. So that's a person going into trance. He's exhibiting good trance behavior. It looks to the layperson a little bit scary, but he's actually very relaxed. And by doing that, actually, he's deepening his trance effect. So as he goes deeper, and so we can even go deeper and deeper into this feeling. So I'm saying to Ram, you're doing a great job. You can go deeper into this feeling of relaxing, deep and relaxed. And this is the other thing. Ram is a brilliant, brilliant physician. He's a doctor, strong-minded. He can do this. He doesn't lose his mind. He doesn't become weak. He's just going along with something for the experience in a sense. So now I'll ask him to roll his eyes back as far as he can. Relax all the way. I'm going to count you down to count of 3, 2, 1, and I ask you to go into a deep and relaxing sleep. Deep and relaxed. Now look at his eyes. So now you're seeing REM behavior. So his eyelids are flickering. If you could zoom a little bit closer, you would see that his eyelids are flickering, he's relaxed and calm. And he's also showing a few idiomotor signals. So he's present. He can hear everything that's going on. And I would say he's more open to suggestion. So I'm going to make a suggestion. One, that really we're honored to have you here. It's really great what you're doing. Thank you for volunteering, for being part of this. It's great to have you on the show. And that I'm going to suggest to you that you feel, this is a suggestion, you feel really good and you feel confident about what the work, the hypnosis demonstration that you are doing right now. That's right, which causes you to smile. That's right, and you feel good and confident. And that you can go deeper into that feeling of, I'm doing something useful for people that are watching this, or seeing this, or hearing this. So I forgot that we're also on the kind of radio, so to speak. So what we saw was, first Ram rolled his eyes back, and we see the whites of his eyes. Now, there's something called the Spiegel test. It's one way that you can measure, a quick way to measure somebody's proneness to hypnotizability. You actually put your finger on top of their head, and you ask them to look up. If their eyes go white, which is what Ram's eyes did do, then probably they're a good hypnotic subject. So that's the test. And we didn't need to do the full test to see that it was true. Then I basically did a countdown, gave the sleep command, which is a sort of mysterious thing we can kind of explain. But then you start seeing REM behavior. So I believe Ram has transitioned into a waking dream state. He still knows what's going on. He still knows, he can be also aware of everything that's happening, but he's also has an internal movie that has become active. And so he sees himself. So the movie was, here he's sort of participating in a public experiment. He is doing a great job, which he really is. He really is doing a great job because he's exhibiting the phenomena, and it's interesting to people. And now we can make any suggestion. I don't know I can't remember with things that Ram and I, if we do this, but one of the simple suggestions I often make to people is that it is very easy for them to laugh. Now, but particularly easy if you hear other people laughing. But I don't know if Ram is a laugher or not. We'll see. So if I was to go, and so even though he's in state, he easily laugh. Now we can try sort of more elaborate things, but I'm just sort of trying to exhibit phenomena, and it's kind of and seeing that is happening. Because, for example, most people you can't just ask them to start laughing and they can start doing it, but he can do it because he's in trance.
It's be a good time to try out some of my bad jokes, I suppose.
That's right. Try some of your bad jokes. You can try some of your bad jokes.
Where'd you go to grad school, Anastasia?
Me?
Yeah.
Columbia.
Yeah, I never heard of it. Come on.
So, notice that Ram actually sort of entered, like I would say, a very pleasant state. He looks happy, he feels happy, and this is also an important point. What a lot of people don't know about hypnotic trance is that it is very pleasant. I wouldn't go as far as to say as euphoric, but very calming and very serenity. Is that fair? Some serenity to it. And so remember we talked about night flight. So let's try something. I'll see if this works. So I'm just going to make sure that Ram is in good and deep, because there's different levels of trance. And because we're talking to him, he's probably not that deep, but now we can go a little bit deeper. So I'm going to do this with fractionation. Fractionation is just simply the idea that we bring the person out of trance and then we put them back in. So on the count of 3, 2, 1, I'll ask Ram to open your eyes just for a second. You can just open your eyes, and now when you go right back in, that's right, just gradually opening your eyes. Good. You're going to go back in twice as deep. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, deep sleep. Deep, relaxing sleep. And even deeper now, as I count you down, imagine going down a set of stairs, 10, 9, each step more relaxed, 8, deeper relaxed, 7, deeper and deeper, 6, 5, super deep, 3, 2, 1. One more time, deep, deep, deep sleep. Good, beautiful. Feeling calm and relaxed, beautifully in trance. So now that he's in this deeper trance, let's try something interesting. As you're sitting in this chair, very calm and relaxed, deeply relaxed, you're going to have the ability to lift up out of your body. Even though you're in London, England right now, you're going to lift up out of your body and you're going to float up in the air above your body starting now. As you float up above your body, you're floating way up. Look down, you can see London at night. The air is fresh and cool. You see the flickering lights below. And as you see those flickering lights, you start to move and fly. You realize you can go anywhere you want just by looking in that direction. You can fly in that direction. So you can fly way towards the center of London where you see the towers, some of the famous sites and the Thames River. As you fly over that river, you notice, remember, the Thames River can sometimes be terribly polluted. And even from there, you can smell the kind of bad smell of the Thames River. Notice how he reacts. That's right. Beautiful. And now you keep flying over the Thames River, and you can go very, very quickly now. And you fly further to the south, flying across the Atlantic Ocean. And when you fly across the Atlantic Ocean, you go all the way to the Caribbean. You get to the Caribbean, you go and you see that you're coming to a Caribbean island. When you look closer, that island is smoking because there's a volcano in the middle of that island. That volcano is spewing lava, but you're naturally curious, so you fly over the volcano. But as you do, you notice volcanoes are powerful, that it is very hot. And you can feel the heat rising up from the volcano. You can feel it on your body. But it's not too much to be intolerable. But you can feel the heat heating you up. And in fact, that's right, heating up your body. You're a little bit of a daredevil, so you're not going to do anything dangerous, but you're just going to stay over the volcano. And as you do, you get hotter and hotter. You may even sweat. That's right. You're enjoying it a little bit like a quick sauna that because you're able to adjust your distance from the volcano so that you remain safe. Even though it's spewing lava, even though it is hot, you can feel the heat of the volcano. Now, you fly, that's enough of that. So you're going to fly away and you instantly cool off and feel refreshed. And now you fly to the distance where you see some beautiful snow-capped mountains. You fly towards the mountains and you land at the lip of a glacier where it is actually quite fresh and cool. And so now you feel a little bit cooler, cold even. As you feel cooler and colder, you start to feel a little bit like you aren't dressed for the occasion. You may even start to shiver, or you want to protect yourself from the cold. It is significantly cold here. And you can feel that. Now, looking around the glacier, you realize that's enough of that. So you're going to now fly up. And you fly way up into the air, going straight up. Now you look for other places to go. And when you fly up, you find a beautiful but bizarre exotic island. So you fly to that exotic island. And you land in the beautiful jungle of that island. The jungle is wonderful and magical. You see butterflies, all kinds of plants. That's right, butterflies. And as you follow this one yellow butterfly, you're wondering where it's taking you. And you follow it. And then when you look through the forest, you look through the parting of the trees, you see something a little unnerving. A giant eyeball. And as you look through the forest, you realize that you've landed on an island where there are living dinosaurs. And you are looking into the huge eye of a massive dinosaur. This, of course, makes you nervous. And you're glad the dinosaur hasn't seen you yet, but just then you notice the dinosaur starts to rear up. And the dinosaur knows that you're there. This is a weird moment. The dinosaur starts to move towards you. You have to remember how to fly. You have to remember how to fly. And you remember the very first experience, all you had to do was look. All you had to do was look. But the dinosaur is moving towards you, coming straight towards you. And you remember now that you look up and you fly straight up away from that dinosaur. That's right, up and away. And you can even look down. The dinosaur is frustrated because it didn't get to you, and you're now completely safe. And you can even laugh at the dinosaur that tried to eat you but failed. Silly dinosaur. Did not get me. And now you can fly away from that island. We're not going to mess with that island anymore. And when you fly all the way back, you're going to fly all the way back to Europe, flying over London. There's a familiar feeling. You see the Thames River, the towers. Fly over to your house, fly down to your house, going down over the top, the ceiling of your building, through the ceiling now, and you're going to drop back into your body feeling refreshed, calmed, and relaxed. Because you've had this trip, and you've had this amazing trip, when you come back just briefly, you're going to feel a feeling of euphoria, energy, and a little bit of feeling of being high, something that we both talk about, the feeling in breath work where you feel a kind of dizzy but beautiful energy. When you open your eyes, you're going to be in that energy, and you may be unable to speak just for a brief moment, but it will come back to you. If we ask you questions, you will try to speak, but it will be impossible to speak. The more you try to speak, the more it will be impossible. You're going to come back and open your eyes in the count of 3, 2, 1. When I snap my fingers, now. Okay. How do you feel?
It feels it's a lot of levity. It's like you feel much lighter. I think it does. You don't really know what's going on. It's just, I guess, that overwhelming feeling. It's like top to bottom. It's really pleasant.
Really pleasant. Good. That was well done, by the way. I hope the dinosaur part scary, or was it frightening?
No.
Because you knew there was kind of a story.
Sure, it was a journey, or I guess the fact that you could, that I was being guided. It just felt that everything was safe. It was
Do you guys have any questions for Ram? You can answer.
What is the experience stored as? Do you remember it as something that you were guided through, or as something that you actually experienced?
That was definitely something I experienced. It's the good thing about all this process is that you don't have to do anything. It's just everything is just, I guess, transferred into your mind, and you have to let go. Otherwise, it doesn't. You don't have to even argue. As long as you just follow through, there's a sort of confidence, the safety. But afterwards, you can remember the whole experience, but you need to go through it step by step and not just try to imagine it as a narration, I guess. You have to remember the images. You have to remember the smells. Like when you mentioned the volcano or the horrible smell of the Thames River, whatever. It's as long as you can include all the senses, it's a much better experience.
Do you feel like it's active? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so just to add to what he's saying is just that one of the ways that we understand depth of trance is exactly this way. So, for example, if you're experiencing it just as somebody telling you a story, then you're in a low level, you're not in a very deep trance. If you're experiencing it kind of like you're watching a movie, that's like a deeper trance. But if you're experiencing it like you're in the movie, which I think that's what happened, then you're in a what some people call a third level trance. It's a deeper trance.
Do you feel like it's something that you have to willingly commit to? Is it an active choice to let yourself be hypnotized?
Yes, I think so. I think the more you do, like everything else, the more you commit to it, the more you want to do it, the easier it gets every time. And I think it really depends on the person's availability, I guess. How much they need this brief disconnection with what tethers them to the ground, I guess. I mean, that's how I felt for a lot of my life. And therapy helps you deal with it, but hypnotherapy I feel like it sort of helps you more to let go. It's tough, but it's not as stress inducing as all the other therapies, I guess. It's great, co-therapy along with other medical treatments, but you really need to commit, I guess. And I think most people, well, not most people, a lot of people are not as highly hypnotizable as others. So it really depends on your input. I guess if I weren't as highly hypnotizable, it would have taken a longer time to sort of achieve what I wanted.
So, like, when you're using this to, we mentioned at the beginning that you had just sat for the boards there in England, and this was something that helped you with that. Was it procedural, like you were doing these surgeries or whatever, going through the anatomy, or was it more a spiritual thing, like you were strengthening yourself to be somebody who was, strong and competent and capable?
Right. I think hypnotherapy helps you reset and reevaluate. I think everything from I think more of a level of conduct. How you behave, all your how your mind operates. As long as you reset it and reformat your brain, which is I think helped tremendously. Hypnotherapy. You have that second chance to do it all again, which is exactly what I did. I studied before that for other medical boards, other tests, but after applying hypnotherapy along with other therapies, like breath work and mindfulness and stuff like that, I think hypnotherapy was the key into reigniting everything and doing it right. I think it really lays the groundwork for something tremendously gratifying spiritually, especially spiritually. And with that in hand, with those tools are something that not everybody gets to have. I was lucky enough to find those tools to this type of therapy, and I was able to lay the groundwork for the rest, like you said. Learning new concepts, applying everything with a different set of goggles, if you will. But it really transforms all your visions. It helps you not be as stressed. It helps you relieve all of that weight that you sometimes carry, and you feel that you have to carry all that. But it doesn't really help if you have such a heavy objective. It was I had a lot of a list of objectives, things that I wanted to achieve that I thought were impossible. But hypnotherapy helps you in a different way, and you don't even realize it, I guess. But looking back, in contrast, I think it made a major difference, especially spiritually. Honestly, I think I had to work a lot at myself, spiritual wise, because I thought everything that I needed in order to achieve success had to be academic. It had to be by the books. Follow these set of rules, and as long as you follow the recipe, you're supposed to have the result, right? It's scientific. But a lot of people, I think, underestimate that power of turning your modus operandum, I guess, you know, turning it around and really applying it to get what you want. And to this day, I get, like I said, in contrast, looking back, I have more to be thankful of what I've achieved, because I've achieved a lot of things that I never even intended to. It's just like bonus things that I didn't know I needed, especially spiritually. You know, I admit I wasn't such a spiritual person as I am now, but I know the difference is vast. It really is incredibly important.
So you're a practicing physician, and I'm really curious about the way that this kind of work could make its path into conventional medicine, because it seems right now like it's squarely on the outside. Do you see a way that these methods could be incorporated? Because obviously, more and more every day, I feel like I'm reading a new study about how the conscious processes of the brain, and to some extent the subconscious processes, play out in the health landscape, you know, with disease, not even just psychological disease, but with physical disease. We know that the gut is tied in right, you know, through the hypothalamus to the brain, and there's a lot of crosstalk where physical ailments can manifest. I mean, it sounds so crazy, but it's very mainstream that physical ailments can be manifest from conscious processes. And it seems like this sort of process, this therapy, if you will, would have a huge role in medicine in the future, at least in my sunny picture of the future. Well, is there a road to that, or is it still too much witchcraft?
I mean, I think ideally it would have to make its way through the little cracks that, you know, science today has to, you know, science imposes today, I think, in these types of therapies. There have been studies that, you know, before I actually engaged in hypnotherapy and looked for a hypnotherapist, I was, you know, I wanted to see the evidence. I read about it. And it turns out that there is evidence. A lot of people use hypnotherapy to cure chronic illnesses like autoimmune diseases, like psoriasis, like arthritis, chronic pain, for instance. And I think one of the main reasons is the fact that you learn to decrease your level of stress, you know, like physically, like, for instance, cortisol is seen to, a lot of people seem to oversecrete cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So they constantly live in this fight or flight response. Cortisol also happens to be secreted when there is danger. And people constantly live with the feeling that they're in danger. It's preposterous. It's also sad. But that's how, you know, things really are. And your immune system...
it's hyper-inflammatory too, right? Oh, sorry,
exactly.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Basic, what you say, it's inflammation is good up to a certain point. But once it crosses the threshold, it's extremely damaging to the body. I mean, to every organ system. If you constantly secrete cortisol and constantly inflame your body, your immune system will lose track and attack itself, attack the, you know, the body. It's supposed to heal very transitory or transient diseases, and that's it. But because of what we eat, because of, at some point, I guess, our genetics, because of what we do, how we deal with stress, our level of all of these stress hormones, you know, our bodies have been accustomed to be in this fight or flight response.
I think it's deeply tied into what we were talking about earlier with humans being these, if there's one defining feature about humans, it's that we have the ability to waking dream in some sense. We take language and we can format scenes and we can live out various futures that don't have to happen. Like I can make plans essentially, which is like trying on these different future options. It's almost like we're time travelers in a sense. So it seems to me like that's part of why we fall prey to these cortisol traps, is because we're living out these experiences that haven't actually happened. I mean, there's a great Tom Petty line that's like, most of the things I worry about never happen anyways. And it's 100% true. And once you kind of get a hold of that, you can make a lot of progress in terms of your own health too. Go ahead.
I was going to mention like what you were saying about this human ability. Now, I don't have proof of this, but this to me blew my mind. There were some very interesting studies of cats dreaming. So apparently, what they had this, they were able to give cats a drug which stopped them from having sleep paralysis. So again, the idea being that when you dream, you are paralyzed so that you do not act out your dreams. So they would give these cats these drugs, and cats would act out their dreams. They would basically, and they have these videos, I think you can probably find them on the internet somewhere, of cats acting out the dreams. Here's the funny twist. Cats have very boring dreams. They basically dream about chasing things or being followed or running away from things or pouncing. Like, that's basically it. And as you point out, like this might be, I just see things we're hard on human beings. We're like, we're destroying the earth and we're bad. And, we tend to be hard on what we are. But human beings might be the only animal that can do what you describe, which is sort of have these fantastical imaginations, for better or for worse. It's not always good, but like, for example, cats, which we think of as a pretty sophisticated animal, actually, it does not seem that they can do it. Now, what is interesting, I was going to say, like, my personal belief is that this also brings us back to play. I personally believe that the greatest revolution that ever happened on the planet was the invention of play. And it's, though I don't want to be absolute about this, it's roughly what separates mammals from reptiles. And it's the reason why mammals are the dominant, possibly the dominant life on the planet, because at one time it was not that way. The reptiles were faster, smarter, and stronger. And it's because we can create these conjecture situations where we can practice things. So that's literally what we did with the exam stuff. Was that Ram and I were like, let's war game this. You're, go into trance. Imagine you're in the exam. Imagine that stressful, unexpected things happen. Let's do the movie where all the bad things happen, and imagine that you are prepared, and that you see what you do, and then let's do it again. So this ability, and that's exactly what mammals do. They play hunt. They play escape, and that allows them. It gives them a competitive advantage over reptiles, let's say, which just do, I think it's called fixed action patterns, where they, reptile sees a leg, it bites it. That's kind of what it doesn't dream about. Reptiles probably do not have weird dreams. They also probably have boring dreams. So what you pointed out is like this fantastic aspect of human nature that is not understood, not researched, I think. And people say this. I mean, they'll say imagination is a wonderful thing, but they don't really put their money where their mouth is. They don't really believe it. And this brings us a little bit. If I can rant one more thing about religion, is I was shocked by somebody had mentioned this interesting observation that Christianity wasn't always so opposed to imagination, and religion in general wasn't always so opposed to progress. And here's this book explains it kind of, which is that a lot of religious thought is based on the idea that God made the world exactly the way he intended it. This is the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to imagine other ways for it to be. Mm. And that itself limits imagination, puts a ceiling on imagination. And so it is, and it's true. Hypnosis works by imagination. The more imaginative, like the story, to a certain extent, the more the person goes into trance.
Yeah, I really feel like it's got to be a defining feature of what it means to be a human. In some sense, I'm always looking for I love definitions, especially in science, because it's one of the biggest crimes in science. Is you read these papers and they'll be like, and blah 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 consciousness, but they don't define what they mean by consciousness. It's like the subject of the paper, and they won't say what it means. And so I'm always curious, big concepts like human being and life. And I feel like there's something very, very important about humans' ability to travel into the past and into the future and project these. Like when I was younger, I heard a really good interview with Grandmaster Flash, the producer, and the interviewer asked him what his process was like in doing this last album. And he was like, listen, man, what I do, I call it art detection. And what I do is when I sit down to make an album, I don't think about what I want the album to be or anything. I imagine that I'm playing the album for a room full of people and they're loving it. And I listen to all the things they love about it. And then I just work backwards and think about all the things I need to do to get backwards each step from that to the mastering room, to the mixing room, to the instruments. And it had a profound effect on me, because I think that's exactly how you execute things in the world is visualizing the product, visualizing yourself delivering the product. It's really powerful.
Yeah, and by the way, that is essentially a form of hypnotherapy. That's what hypnotherapy. There's so many different protocols, but it's one of them. It's called the as-if protocol. Imagine as if that it's already happened. You can get carried away with that, but it's a powerful protocol. And I think this is why I'm so big on I am not a stage I do stage hypnosis, but I'm a hypnotherapist. But it's why I really believe in stage hypnosis, because stage hypnosis I actually think is an advanced form of human entertainment. If you go to a good stage hypnosis show, it is the funniest thing you've ever seen. It's the funniest kind of comedy you can go to. But what they don't do is they don't get really conceptual. They don't go, what if we're all aliens? Sometimes they do that actually, but the kind of wilder thinking that is possible. I'm part of a show right now where we're trying to do that. We're trying to dream up, make stage hypnosis a bit more progressive by using it to imagine unbelievable or wild scenarios. And that's what, again, if we're right that this is what a true virtue of the human brain, our ability to imagine and to dream in this wide-ranging way.
I feel like you're going to get a knock at the door from the CIA any moment now.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
could use this. Huh?
That's right.
Sounds very functional. Yeah, but what do you make of that stuff, like the Surround and the idea that people could potentially be programmed against their will? Is there any genuine concern there? Or because right now we've been talking about people who've mostly been volunteering. I mean, that seems to be a hallmark feature. Maybe that's why the CIA is not knocking down your door right now. I don't know.
Well, this is actually, I kind of wanted to go in this direction because I feel like one of the reasons that people are resistant to hypnosis is that it's kind of creepy and weird. Not to put that as the frame for the conversation, but the idea that you could give up your agency and on one hand have somebody help you heal, but on the other hand have somebody to program you to not be yourself anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. See, it's a weird thing. This comes up a lot. Hypnosis being creepy and weird. But I think there's some real concrete reasons why. In the 60s and 70s, there used to be ads in the back of every magazine saying, "Learn how to control women. Take this quick hypnosis course." So, and I think those ads actually worked. And so, a lot of people who became hypnotists were creepy people who wanted power over people. Right. And that was their thing. So that's real. I think now, to give you what's different, I just came back from Hypnothoughts, which is the main American hypnosis conference that happens every year. It's a complete, first, it's half women now, which is wonderful. The speakers are half women, the attendees are half women. And it doesn't have, though that element is still there. There's some greasy guys there and kind of what you might expect. And
they're always the bad guys in the comic books.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And in Hollywood films, I mean, look at Get Out. I mean, the Hollywood films about hypnosis are still, first of all, they're all false. And there's a guy who actually made a list of the history of Hollywood films misportraying hypnosis, because it's been one of the great, along with sharks, it's been one of the great villains of Hollywood history. And it's led to this sort of great misportrayal. And the sad part is that people who might benefit a lot from hypnosis or from going to a stage hypnosis show don't do it. And that isn't because of so every hypnotist goes to this where you hear all these crazy stories are you inside my brain? What if I don't wake up? What if I can be hypnotized against my own will? There are interesting examples. But I looked at this. So there are these examples, so you ask CIA, when can you hypnotize yourself when can you hypnotize people against their will? So there's a really funny example a Canadian hypnotist who tried to show how good he was by hypnotizing cops out of giving him traffic tickets. So he drives through, it's in one of my TEDx's, he drives through a stop sign at twice the speed limit, gets pulled over, and he runs like a well-known hypnotic induction on the police officer, and it works. He drives away, and without getting a ticket, the police officer is like, "Goodbye, have a nice day." And but here's the thing:
the cop just kind of stands there for a while too. He looks just
that's right, in trance. Yeah. He's in trance. That's right. So, but here's the interesting thing: that guy then points out, and he's a friend of mine, so I asked him about it. He says, "Yeah, sure, it worked that one time, but it failed the other 5 times, and here I've got the tickets to prove it." Mm-hmm. So for example, if hypnosis against people's will was really effective, there would be hypnotic crime sprees everywhere. But there are some, like there was one in Italy where I think a guy would hypnotize cashiers, and he would get them to. He would just walk in, and he would hold out a paper bag, and they would just put the cash in the bag and walk out. But
I mean, to some extent, this is what confidence men really mean, right? Because you're, in some sense, really confident, charismatic people must be hypnotic, right?
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly. I mean, I often demonstrate this thing called the Trump induction, handshake induction, because Donald Trump's handshake is exactly like a rapid induction in hypnosis. There's no difference. The only difference is he doesn't say sleep, but what he does is he does the induction, and then you're looking at Donald Trump. And so it's like kind of like, I think the way he thought of it is like, I'm advertising myself, and it probably works. It probably explains what's going on right now. It causes, and we should say one thing too. There is an authoritarian element. Now let me explain what I mean, because we got to, that there's two big kind of, I'm not saying styles, but when Milton Erickson came along, so he's the great American hypnotist. Actually, what made him different was he developed a feminine style of permissive hypnotherapy. He didn't say to people, he didn't command people to go to sleep. He would just say, wouldn't it be nice if you relaxed deeply and went into a very wonderful and calm state? The principle being that you already want to go into a calm state, and he's just giving you permission and creating space. And in fact, kind of like witchcraft. That's like Ericksonian hypnosis, permissive. But before Erickson, it was authoritarian. And the explanation, so meaning the hypnotist appeared as a kind of aggressive figure, stood on a stage, had a commanding deep voice, surprised people, and maybe ordered them into trance. Now, and another part of that might be that human beings are hierarchical primates, and it may be the hypnotist is putting themselves within a hierarchy and the people essentially fall into line in trance-like states, which is like the army. So it just is naked. You can just see it when you have the hypnotist, but it's going on in the corporation, it's going on in the army, it's going on in sales all the time.
And that's the creepy thing about it, right? Because everybody wants to believe that they're not susceptible to it. And yet you were confronted by the fact that if it is real, and if those people on stage are actually going through something that is very real, that they aren't just stooges who are pretending, then that means that it's possible that you too are one of the people that is up on stage. And then you have to start thinking about the entire world in a different framework, because obviously this is a thing that every single large institution has tried to leverage against you for not only your entire life, but probably since the dawn of institutions.
Exactly.
If you
like how do you get an army together even, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just pomp and circumstance and ceremony and ritual and all of these things that I think about military parades even. And just all of these columns of people moving together as one body and the rhythmic geometry of all of their limbs.
Drumming.
It's funny that you say that. Is that famously, when it was Alexander the Great or one of the famous invaders, I think it was Alexander the Great, was specifically good at creating these mass formations of soldiers that would march across territory. And apparently, literally, when people saw this, who had never seen this before, when they were being invaded, they would shit their pants. Like they were so transfixed by what they saw, they would just give up. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. And right, you say like, where is it? And this is what I often find funny when people. I was flown down to Miami in the middle of COVID. I was flown down to Miami to be part of this thing called Hereticon, which was like this crazy conference. Peter Thiel and this kind of neoconservative gang a little bit. It was a very fascinating conference. Robert Malone was there. I was there because Robert Malone had said basically COVID is mass hypnosis. So they're like, let's get a hypnotist to chime in. And so that's how I ended up there. And I on the COVID thing, I believed the science, but I also believed I could see that mass hypnosis. One of the ways you hypnotize people, and this is what I'm a little bit an expert in, is through shock or rapid induction. So that's where you surprise somebody, you trigger the reorientation reflex, and you give them a new story. So I say to you, there's a massive disease. It's unavoidable. You're going to get it. You're going to die, and you're going to suffer terribly. Shock and so on. And now here's the new story. You have, and people, I think, mistakenly thought it was just the vaccine. I think the hypnosis was the broader cultural control that happened.
I bet you could totally hypnotize someone into having a stuffy nose or something like that too. Not that you would do that, but it'd be a really interesting experiment if you got people to agree to it.
Symptomology, well, there's the famous examples of happened after 9/11. It's called mass psychogenic illness, where people were on trains and they smelled a weird smell and they developed symptoms as if they had been gassed, and it was all in their heads. But like, I don't know, 100 people got shuttled to the hospital. So yeah, you can. I mean, one of the craziest things you can do in hypnosis, not everybody, but you can hand someone a raw onion. You can hit in trance. You hypnotize them and tell them it's an apple, and they will eat the raw onion, going, "Wow, this is a delicious apple." And chances are, though this is not always true, but often their eyes will not tear. They will not respond to eating a raw onion. They will respond to eating an apple.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, especially when it comes to COVID, that's a really, really interesting. I mean, there's a Nature Medicine paper that did a intentional infection study with about 30 healthy volunteers, and it was very, very, very interesting. Like, the people who had the most PCR were not the people who were necessarily the most symptomatic. Actually, there was really no correlation between the two. It was very, very strange. And, when you pair that together with some of the things you're talking about, or like the Wim Hof experiment where he's able to lower his inflammatory reaction, you just can't turn away from the fact that there's something conscious in our involvement in disease. It's really crazy, and Western medicine doesn't seem like it has the stomach for this, but I don't think we'll be able to ignore it for much longer.
Well, I think that it's difficult when it comes to medicine, because what is the worst thing that you can hear from a doctor? I can't help you. This is in your head. And it's also a very effective thing for a doctor to tell you, because then the doctor offloads the responsibility of fixing it onto you. And so,
unless they had some sort of hypnosis protocol, psychedelic protocol, whatever it is, that they were able to say, this is in your head and I can help you.
That exactly. And so I think that the medical technology has to get to the point where you go from just, this is in your head and it is not my problem.
I think we also have to get rid of the stigma that this is in your head is somehow like less important. Like, reality is in your head, everybody. Like, obviously, this is all happening in my head right now. So I don't think that it should have this demeaning stigma to it, that just because there's, some second order effects of the physical symptoms or something, that there's somehow, it's less important that your consciousness is interceding. I don't know how we got to that point where in your head was a bad thing.
Yeah, Ram, maybe you can weigh in on this, because it feels like in the medical profession this might be changing, but it's unclear how much people are adopting it across the board.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it's a big problem. I mean, the fact that somebody tells you that, probably the illness is in your head, there's not much I can do about it, basically just gives you, I mean, as a patient, 100% responsibility and control over it. Makes you feel like you're alone almost. And that's a scary feeling, because if you feel you're alone, that means that nobody knows about it other than you. So you have to be your own doctor. And of course, that's not good for the disease itself. So it's sort of like a vicious cycle there, and it basically it's the patient is doomed to repeat it and worsen over time. But I think doctors, as long as they have empathy and that they tell the patients that even though it's in your head, it's a reality to you, right? I mean, it's still real. It doesn't diminish it. It's as if I had a disease. Let's say I had diabetes, but nobody else had diabetes. It doesn't matter. It's still a disease to me, and I have to take care of it. So I think it's the job of the physician to look in the cracks. Where does a patient need help? And a lot of the times is overdrive of your inflammatory system, right? I mean, there's so much inflammation going on in many organs, but it's triggered by something that they can't put their fingers on. Because as physicians, we are trained to look, well, it really depends what kind of physician you are, but let's say it's the emergency department. You have to rule out basically, is it cancer? Is it life-threatening? And if it's not, you have to rule out stuff. And if you rule out, if you go through your list of differentials and it's none of those, then a lot of physicians make the mistake of making it not important. I remember when I was in the emergency department, you had what we call, our regulars, which are patients that unfortunately went to the ER because they complain about the same things. So much so that doctors and nurses would scoff. They would sigh, and they would just basically just sort of low-key make fun. Uh-oh, patient X is coming in. I'm pretty sure it's the same disease. And they would sigh. But the patient would actually be suffering. Now, a lot of these patients, yes, granted, probably it's what they say, it's psychosomatic. It's a manifestation of something deep. It's a problem with your mind. And yeah, an emergency doctor cannot really give you anything to cure it, right? It has to be cured from its root cause. And of course, therapy, that's where therapy comes in along with other interventions, if you will. But I think a lot has to do with empathy. And a lot has to do with knowing, I mean, yes, you can basically tell your patient that they're out of the danger zone, right? It's not cancer, it's not something that's immediately life-threatening. But that's where the buck stops for a lot of doctors. I think they should go with the patient, basically sort of holding their hand up until they reach a diagnosis or know what's actually bothering them. You can only do so much to control symptoms, but if you don't really treat the root cause, which a lot of times it might seem impossible because it's a hard, arduous process, you're basically shooting in the dark at certain moments. But that's why I think therapy is any type of therapy, whether it's cognitive behavioral, exposure and response prevention, hypnotherapy, what have you. I think it's almost tailor-made to the patient. I think that's the tricky part. That's why it takes a long time. I've been in therapy for over 10 years, and I think I've memorized every single therapy even before I started studying medicine. And I'm still discovering new therapies that are benefiting me right now. It's a process. It's sort of like a condition. I think it's like when somebody diagnoses you with an incurable condition or disease. A lot of people like to say it's an incurable disease. I like to think of it as a condition. It's just one more extra thing that you have to take care of for the rest of your life. A lot of mental illnesses, I think, are sort of like that as well. And as long as you keep supporting the patient, if needed, I'm not a doctor that loves medicine or prescribe medication per se. as long as they actually need it. As long as you take care all of the basic needs of the patient, which, yes, a lot of it has to deal with empathy and basic human decency, but it sort of seems counterintuitive that doctors cannot provide that, because you have a whole sea of other diseases you can actually treat and diagnose and put your finger on and eventually cure. So it's sort of like the the land of people that cannot really receive any help because you cannot see what the problem is. I think that's where getting in touch, and that's where spirituality comes, and all this hypnotherapy and therapy and psychotherapy, whatever type of therapy you can provide to the patient that is not immediately dangerous. That's where the problem lies, and that's where we're not really trained enough, I think.
Seems to me like there might be like an administrative roadblock too, because I don't know about, I think that England probably has better basic healthcare than we do. I think most people do. But you're often getting handed off from these very busy, overworked person to the next busy, overworked person, and you don't have that continual connection. And I think that that prevents the healthcare workers from being able to help the patient out in the long run. And obviously it's not good for the patient. So
that's definitely true. Systematically, there's problems. I was thinking there's a really fantastic book for anybody who wants to know more about this that was written by, I want to say, Suzanne O'Callaghan. She put it out a couple of years ago, and it was called It's All in Your Head. And she was a neurologist who treated treatment-resistant epileptics. And she found that about 30% of the people that were sent to her had epilepsy in name only, in the sense that they were having seizures, but they didn't fulfill any of the physiological criteria for epilepsy. They were basically faking seizures, but they didn't realize that they were faking seizures. And so her job with this group of people, so a third of the treatment-resistant people, was to figure out how to get them into therapy and how to get them to confront the fact that their sickness was not something that was out of their control. And so a lot of it had to do with the delicate introduction of the idea that there is this feedback between something that happens in your own mind. And so she talks a lot about the traumatic experiences that they're having that trigger these sorts of events, and the way that the mind walls it off in a way almost like a wound. And assist, yeah, exactly. So there's this thing that's somewhere far away that's creating all of these problems. And it's almost impossible to find, because you have to stay, like you said, in the system for so long with people that are dedicated to helping you fix it, that it's rarely the case that you get to the end of that road and somebody can fix it. Like I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and somebody the other day put out a Twitter poll, and it was asking people how many people had a chronic condition that was completely untreatable by medicine, because every time they went to go see a doctor, they were basically like, I don't know. And it was...
I always get a little sentimental feeling when I watch old movies and there's like a family doctor and he's like known the kids since they were like born, and now they're old and they're having kids. And I'm just like, wow, that must be so incredible to have that relationship over time.
Yeah. So I don't know, there's a lot of things to fix, but it seems like we're on a path towards making it better, because we're starting to realize that there is more to health than just the body.
And a lot of this stuff's appearing in the literature. It's hard science.
Yeah. And so hypnosis appears like it's heading into that direction. And it's a topic that we're probably going to keep revisiting on the show, because it's still so much on the edge of what is embraced. Right? It's still kind of a fringe subject. Like hypnotherapy is still, it hasn't hit the big time yet. But I think that it will in the next few years or in the next few decades, because it seems like such a straightforwardly apparent way to get under the hood of what's happening.
Do you have any, closing words of wisdom for people to overview this and its place in the landscape? Either of you, I guess, yeah.
Ram, do you want to say this?
Yeah, sure. I think the first step into pushing a little bit people into considering as one of the alternatives to get better is that hypnotherapy has to be cleared out of any misconceptions. And I think you mentioned a few of them, like movie wise, or you think that, hypnotherapists are going to plant fake thoughts or whatever they might be. It's really not that at all. I mean, even I was a little bit skeptical. I mean, highly skeptical, to be honest, before initiating all of this, but I just decided to give it a try. Why? Because I was in a place where nothing else really worked. I've exhausted all the available therapy that I was getting. So, I mean, I just had to look elsewhere where even there was a time where I didn't even consider it. So I just had to, quote unquote, swallow my pride, I guess, and just go out of my comfort zone and dive straight into it. But nobody had really cleared of any misconceptions, except for you, Albert. So I guess people have to be better informed. A lot of people are skeptical and would miss out on a really, really effective treatment. And what's really good about hypnotherapy is that you really are in control. And I mean that not only because you let yourself just go to where you want to go. Once you let go, once those walls, the resistance falls, you don't really know where it's going to take you. And I think that's, relinquishing control is the key there. And a lot of people are control freaks. And I understand, because I was one of them, and I love to be in control. But what if you sort of just relinquish control for a little bit? You feel immediate relief. You feel like, wow, this weight, I mean, I don't have to carry all of this alone, I've allowed myself to be in a state where I can just put everything down for a second, clear my mind, rewire, regroup, re-strategize, right? Think all of these, like for instance, the memory bank that you mentioned, I think it was like a picture bank. A lot of these exercises where you cleanse your mind, sort of, but you can only do that if you repeat it, if you continue with the therapy. And you can master that. I mean, I never thought that I would even be considered a hypnotizable person. I remember when I first met you, Albert, you said, sure, I mean, we can get together for one session and see how hypnotizable you are, and then we can go from there. Because, I mean, I remember I was carrying so many problems and traumas, I guess, which, I mean, still I'm dealing with. But these are traumas that I never really knew even existed. And it's not even something that, I mean, everybody carries traumas, right? But as long as you're able to manage those traumas, you don't really have to get into the nitty gritty of it. You just have to let it go. And I think that's what hypnotherapy personally meant. It's letting go, take a breath, something that I've never done in my life. Again, I was my own worst enemy. And I was not able to see that with conventional therapy, even the gold standard, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So I think people should give it a try and let go of all these cliches and misunderstandings. I think that's step number one.
I think part of the stigma, if I can just interject, may come down to our society's obsession with leadership. But what it kind of ignores is that leadership requires followership. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about the ways that we want to lead in the world, and people obsess and focus on that. But if we're honest, I'm a follower of lots of things too. And I think that's really healthy. Like, I follow different artists, I follow different podcasts. I look up to lots of these people too, right? This is really important in my own mental health, because I can't just be an island, right? And so I feel like there's not enough attention given to the practice of followership. It's a really funny word to even put out there, but that just occurred to me while you're speaking.
I would elaborate on that. It's more to do with everybody's talking and nobody's listening. That listening is one of the most important qualities we have, and being a good listener should be a virtue, but it often isn't. If you're going to be a great musician, you need somebody to listen to your music.
That's right.
And you have
and
to
you
be
better
good
be
at
good at
listening.
listening, right? Yeah, like I met one of my favorite rock stars when I was like 14, and I was like, kind of picking his brain. How do I get to where you're at? And he was like, I just listen to a lot of music. He's like, I'm 40 years old. I've listened to a lot of music. I listen to music all day, every day. That's what I do. That's all I do. I don't practice scales or anything. I just listen and play music. I was like, wow. And like the climber Alex Honnold, huge superstar after his free solo adventure, same thing. Like, how do you train? He's like, I just climb a lot. I just watch climbing videos. I geek out on climbing. I climb all the time. That's it. And I'm just kind of amazed by people. This guy who's a rising star in the UFC right now, Sean O'Malley, same thing. It's like, what do you do? I just fight all the time. I just dream about fighting. I watch fight videos. It's like, right on. Something comforting to that. So, got some closing thoughts for us, Albert?
Yeah, like I think it's a very good question, and I think you're right that hypnosis is not in this space where it should be. Like, I'll give you like a funny example. Like, if we imagine for 1 second, as we're talking about imagination, the benefit of well-established hypnotherapeutic protocols applied to the population, and how much money is going into that, which I would say is like a tiny amount of money, versus the massive medical establishment, which is this ginormous machine. You can really see like an unbalance. I'm not saying that all that money needs to switch to hypnotherapy, but just imagine if a little bit of it did, a little bit. And the reason I think that hypnosis has struggled for acceptance one of the reasons is lack of a good model. Again, if you ask somebody like, how does it work, and like that's why our discussion was important today. I think that it's this connection, which again is rejected by most scientists. As I understand, there's the connection between dreaming and hypnotic trance. Is that when you understand that, like it all can make sense. It's a what's the word, when the whole model makes sense. And because of that, because of the lack of good model, and because of you have these historical enmities, the medical establishment has always opposed hypnosis. Mesmer was driven out of town. Esdale, the guy who figured out that hypnosis can manage pain, was driven out of town. A lot of hypnotists were driven out of town by guys in white lab coats. And so you have that history, but it's not, also I could say it's not just the hypnotists, it was also the witches. And not just the witches, but the traditional forms of female healing or feminine healing are kind of in there. And so all that, we know that the medical system, for better or for worse, survived by creating a monopoly on healing. And that monopoly hasn't always served us. There's definitely places where it serves us well, but there are so many places where it doesn't. And I think that that's where there's an opening now. And I think people are recognizing the kind of enormous, and a lot of it is just media, that like I could make a TEDx and I could demonstrate. Before that, I would have to be on a TV show for 90 seconds and not be able to explain what I'm doing. But the fact that you can now explain what you're doing, that's the value. Suddenly I saw the value of this podcast where we spend a bit of time, because the truth is there's no way to explain some of these concepts in 12 seconds, and people, it's a bunch of doors opening and then people get it. So that's why, anyways, I'm really glad that we did this.
Yeah, this has been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, the long form, I'm so happy to be alive in this moment when long form content is becoming popular again, if it ever was. I guess people used to like novels and things like that, but it's really, really fun. I mean, the music project we're working on is kind of the same way. We're doing these we'll take like a half an hour to play a song or something, and it's really freeing and wonderful. And I think people are just sick of the like 7-minute or segments between commercials, and I don't know. It's really inspiring.
I think that you can give the idea very briefly. You can tell somebody, look, these are the bones, and you can walk away with just the bones in your hand. But the ability to sit down and to dig into it and look at it from different sides is what the luxury of long form gives us. And so thank you both for coming and for demonstrating and for participating and for helping us build a better, more complete model of nature. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ram, for doing this too.
No,
Yeah,
thank you.
pleasure.
A pleasure to be here. Beautiful show. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I wanted to just pitch really quickly before you bounce, Albert, that we are having our first Demystify Psych conference next April in Austin, Texas.
Oh.
And I'm not sure if your schedule permits, but maybe you could consider stopping by. We can talk about it offline, but
For sure. That sounds fantastic.
It'd be great to have you.
well, thank you both. And yeah, this has been awesome. This is really fun.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
you
have a
very
great
much.
rest of your day, gentlemen.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye, everybody.
Good day.
Bye.